She was meant to board that train. The ticket was clutched in her gloved hand, her bags already loaded, her escape from heartbreak just one step away. But then he appeared through the steam and smoke, the cowboy everyone whispered about, the man she'd sworn to avoid. "Clara, wait," he said, and those two words stopped time itself. One choice, one moment. Everything she thought she knew about her future was about to unravel. Stay with us until the end, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Silver Creek, Colorado Territory, September 1876. The morning sun hadn't yet burned through the mist that clung to Silver Creek's single railway platform, and Clara Whitmore stood alone in that gray space between night and day, between who she'd been and who she was trying to become. Her traveling dress was the color of mourning, deep charcoal with black piping, though she told herself it was practical for the soot and grime of train travel. The truth sat heavier in her chest than the carpetbag at her feet. She was running. The platform boards creaked beneath her boots as she shifted her weight, and the sound seemed impossibly loud in the pre-dawn quiet. In her right hand, she gripped a single ticket, the paper already softening from the dampness of her palm. San Francisco was printed in bold letters across the top, and beneath it, the departure time. 6:47 a.m. She'd checked her father's pocket watch 3 times in the last 10 minutes. It was 6:43, 4 more minutes, 4 more minutes and she'd be free of this place. Free of the whispers that followed her through town like hungry ghosts, free of the pitying looks from women who'd once envied her position. 4 more minutes and Clara Whitmore, Silver Creek's disgraced almost bride, would cease to exist. The train sat on the tracks like a great iron beast, steam huffing from its undercarriage in rhythmic clouds. She could see the conductor making his final rounds, checking doors, conferring with the engineer. A few other passengers had already boarded. A family with 2 small children, their faces pressed against the windows. A businessman in a bowler hat who'd barely glanced at her. An elderly woman who'd given Clara a knowing nod that made her stomach clench with shame. They all know, she thought, and immediately hated herself for caring. "Last call for eastbound service." The conductor's voice rang out across the platform. "All aboard for Denver, Cheyenne, and points east." Clara's hand tightened on the handle of her carpetbag. Everything she owned that mattered was in this bag, or in the trunk already secured in the baggage car. 2 years of teaching in Silver Creek, reduced to 1 trunk and 1 bag. It should have felt like failure. Instead, it felt like amputation, necessary, agonizing, and somehow not quite enough to save her. She took a step forward. The conductor saw her and nodded, already reaching for her ticket. That's when she heard it, her name, carried on the morning air like smoke, like a prayer, like a curse. "Clara." She froze. Every muscle in her body locked tight because she knew that voice. Everyone in Silver Creek knew that voice, though most had the good sense to keep their distance from the man who owned it. "Clara, wait!" She should have kept walking. She should have handed over her ticket, climbed those 3 metal steps, and disappeared into the train's interior without looking back. That would have been the smart thing, the sensible thing, the thing any reasonable woman would do. Clara had always been reasonable. She turned. Wade Hollister stood 20 feet away, positioned between her and the platform's entrance like he'd materialized from the mist itself. He wasn't dressed for town, no Sunday suit or pressed collar. He wore work clothes, denim trousers stained with honest dirt, a chambray shirt rolled to his elbows, scuffed boots that had seen 1,000 miles of hard country. His hat was pushed back on his head, and even from this distance, even in the weak morning light, she could see the intensity in his dark eyes. He looked like trouble. He looked like danger. He looked like he'd ridden hard to get here. "Mr. Hollister," her voice came out steadier than she felt. "It's quite early for a social call." "This isn't a social call." He took 3 steps closer, and Clara's heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. "Don't get on that train." The conductor cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're about to depart." Clara didn't take her eyes off Wade. "I have a ticket." "I know you do." Wade moved closer still, close enough now that she could see the dust on his clothes, the stubble shadowing his jaw, the desperate determination in his expression. "I watched you buy it 3 days ago at the telegraph office. I've watched you pack up your room at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. I've watched you say goodbye to your students at the schoolhouse, pretending you were just going home for a short visit when we both know you're never coming back. Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. You've been watching me? Someone had to. His voice dropped lower, rough as gravel and twice as raw. Everyone else in this town was too busy pretending not to notice you were leaving, too busy pretending they hadn't failed you. Failed me? Clara's laugh was sharp enough to cut. Mr. Hollister, I appreciate whatever misguided chivalry has brought you here at this ungodly hour, but I assure you, don't. He closed the remaining distance between them in 2 long strides, and suddenly he was there, so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Don't do that thing you do where you make your voice all proper and cold, like you're discussing weather instead of your whole life. I've seen you with those kids, Clara. I've seen you fight the school board for decent books. I've seen you stand up to Harold Patterson when he tried to pull his daughter out of school to work his farm. I've seen the real you, and that woman doesn't run. You don't know anything about me. But even as she said it, Clara felt something crack inside her chest, because the worst part was that he was right. Wade Hollister, the town's most notorious bachelor, the man respectable women crossed the street to avoid, saw her more clearly than anyone else in Silver Creek ever had. Last call! The conductor's voice held a note of impatience now. Ma'am, if you're boarding, it needs to be now. The train whistle screamed, a long, mournful sound that seemed to tear the morning in half. Clara flinched, and in that moment of distraction, Wade reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm despite the cool morning air, and his grip was firm but not forceful. He wasn't trying to hold her captive. He was trying to hold her present, here, in this moment that felt like it might shatter if either of them breathed too hard. Don't go, he said quietly, and there was something in his voice, something broken and honest and terrifying. Please, Clara, don't go. The train lurched once, then began to roll. Clara stared at Wade, at this impossible man who'd appeared from nowhere to wreck her carefully planned escape, and felt her entire future begin to move without her. The wheels squealed against the tracks. Steam billowed. The conductor swung aboard the moving train with practiced ease, shaking his head at her hesitation. She should pull her hand free. She should run after that train, should flag it down, should throw herself aboard like some heroine in a dime novel. Her whole life was on that train, her ticket to somewhere new, somewhere no one knew about her humiliation, somewhere she could start fresh without the weight of Silver Creek's judgment pressing down on her shoulders. But Wade Hollister was holding her hand, and she couldn't move. The train picked up speed, its rhythm changing from a hesitant chug to a determined rush. Clara watched it go, watched her carefully constructed escape disappear into the morning mist, and felt something inside her shatter and rearrange itself all at once. What did you just do? She whispered. Wade's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her throat tight. I stopped you from making the biggest mistake of your life. You don't... Clara yanked her hand free, anger flooding in to fill the space where shock had been. You have no right. You're right. He didn't step back, didn't try to touch her again, but he didn't retreat either. I don't have any right. I don't have any claim on you. I'm the man mothers warned their daughters about, the one who showed up in Silver Creek 3 years ago with no past and too much money, the one decent folks don't trust. I know what people say about me, Clara. I know what you probably think about me. Then why? Because I can't watch you throw yourself away. The words came out fierce, almost angry. Because I've spent 2 years watching you pour everything you are into this town, into those kids, giving and giving until there's nothing left. And when one worthless son of a bitch breaks his promise to you, the whole damn town acts like you're the one who failed. And now you're running away like you're the one who should be ashamed. And I can't... He stopped, jaw working, and Clara realized with a jolt that Wade Hollister was fighting for control. I won't let you do it. I won't let you believe you're anything less than extraordinary. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of the train whistle, already fading into memory. Clara's carpetbag slipped from her numb fingers and hit the platform with a soft thud. You don't know what happened. I know enough. Wade's expression softened slightly. I know Thomas Whitfield is a coward who couldn't see what he had, I know he called off your engagement 2 weeks before the wedding because his mama decided a school teacher wasn't grand enough for her precious boy. I know he's already courting the banker's daughter and acting like you never existed. And I know—" his voice dropped to something almost tender. "I know you've been walking through this town like a ghost ever since, teaching your classes and keeping your head high while everyone watches to see if you'll break." "I'm not breaking," but her voice cracked on the words, betraying her. "No," Wade agreed quietly. "You're not breaking. You're running. And there's a difference." Clara wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that leaving Silver Creek was the right choice, the only choice, the smart choice for a woman whose reputation had been publicly shredded. She wanted to tell him that San Francisco represented opportunity, fresh starts, a chance to rebuild herself somewhere no one knew her as that poor Whitmore girl who got jilted. But standing there on the empty platform, watching the morning light strengthen around them, she couldn't make the words come. "I don't have a ticket anymore," she said instead, and hated how lost she sounded. "I know. I don't have anywhere to go." "That's not true." Wade picked up her fallen carpet bag, handling it carefully, like it held something precious. "You have your room at Mrs. Henderson's. You have your students waiting at the schoolhouse, wondering why their teacher isn't there this morning. You have a whole town that needs you, whether they're smart enough to say it or not." "They don't want me." The admission hurt coming out. "I'm an embarrassment. Thomas made sure of that. Thomas Whitfield is an idiot and a liar, and anyone who believes his version of events is worse." Wade's voice took on an edge of steel. "But that's not why you need to stay." "Then why?" Clara looked up at him, this mysterious man who'd disrupted her careful plans, and felt something dangerous unfurl in her chest. "Why should I stay in a place where everyone knows I was publicly humiliated, where I have to walk past Thomas and his new fiancée on the street and pretend my heart didn't break, where decent women like Mrs. Patterson pull their children away from me like failure might be contagious? Give me one good reason, Mr. Hollister." "Because you're not done here yet." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because those kids need you. Because Silver Creek needs you, even if we don't deserve you. Because running away won't fix whatever Thomas Whitfield broke. It'll just mean you carry it with you to San Francisco instead of leaving it behind here." "And what if I can't leave it behind?" The question came out smaller than she intended. "What if it's too broken to fix?" Wade set down her carpet bag and took a half step closer, careful, like she was a wild thing that might spook. "Then you rebuild. You start over. But you do it on your own terms, in your own time, not because some jackass with a weak spine made you feel like you weren't enough." Clara's eyes burned. She hadn't cried when Thomas ended their engagement, hadn't shed a single tear when he'd stood in her parlor and stumbled through his rehearsed speech about different paths and his mother's concerns. She'd remained composed through the pitying visits from well-meaning church ladies, through the whispers at the general store, through the long, empty days of packing up the life she'd thought she'd have. But now, standing on this godforsaken platform with Wade Hollister looking at her like she mattered, like she was worth stopping a train for, she felt the first hot tear spill over. "I don't even know you," she said, swiping angrily at her cheek. "Why do you care?" Something flickered across Wade's face, pain maybe, or recognition. "Maybe that's exactly why I care. Because I don't have any history with you to cloud my judgment. I just see what's right in front of me. A woman who's brilliant and fierce and kind, who's being punished for someone else's failure. And I can't—" He stopped, jaw tight. "I spent too many years watching good people get crushed by bad circumstances. I'm not going to stand by and watch it happen again. Not to you." The platform was empty now except for the two of them and the lingering ghosts of steam from the departed train. Somewhere in town, a rooster crowed. The sun finally broke through the mist, painting everything gold. Clara drew in a shaky breath. "What do you want from me?" "1 hour." Wade held up a single finger. "Give me 1 hour. Let me buy you breakfast at the hotel. Let me make my case for why you should stay. If you still want to leave after that, I'll drive you to the next station myself and make sure you get on the train to San Francisco. But give me 1 hour to change your mind." It was insane. It was improper. It was exactly the kind of thing that would fuel the gossip mills for months. Clara had spent her entire life being proper. 1 hour, she heard herself say, but I'm not promising anything. The smile that crossed Wade's face was like sunrise after a long winter. That's all I'm asking. Yes. The Grand Hotel wasn't actually grand. That was just what everyone called it to distinguish it from the somewhat less impressive Silver Creek Inn down the street. It was a 2-story wooden structure with a dining room that served passable food and decent coffee, and at 7:15 in the morning, it was nearly empty. Nearly, but not quite. Clara felt the weight of stairs as she and Wade entered together. Old Mr. Chen behind the counter did a double take, his eyes widening. 2 ranch hands having an early breakfast looked up from their plates, saw who'd just walked in, and immediately bent their heads together in whispered conversation. A woman Clara vaguely recognized from church, Mrs. Something or other, she couldn't remember, actually dropped her fork with a clatter. Clara's spine went rigid. This was a mistake. She was already the subject of town gossip. Being seen with Wade Hollister would only make it worse. But Wade seemed utterly unconcerned. He guided her to a corner table with a hand hovering near her elbow, not touching, but protective, and pulled out her chair like she was a queen instead of a scandal. "Coffee?" he asked, flagging down the waitress without waiting for an answer. The waitress was Betty Cho, a girl about Clara's age who'd never quite mastered the art of hiding her opinions. Her eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline when she saw them together. "Morning, Miss Whitmore." "Mr. Hollister." She set down 2 cups and filled them without being asked, her gaze darting between them like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "What can I get you folks?" "2 of whatever's hot and filling," Wade said easily. "And biscuits, if you have them." "We always have biscuits." Betty scribbled something on her pad, then hesitated. "Miss Whitmore, I heard you were... folks said you were leaving town." Clara felt her cheeks heat. "Plans change." "I'll say." Betty's gaze slid to Wade with undisguised curiosity. "I'll get your food right out." The moment she left, Clara wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and stared into its dark depths. "This is going to be all over town by noon." "Probably by 10, Wade agreed, completely unruffled. "You don't care?" "About gossip?" He shrugged. "Not particularly. People talk. It's what people do when they don't have enough real problems to occupy their minds." "Easy for you to say." Clara took a sip of coffee, bitter and hot. "You're a man. Your reputation isn't your entire existence." "True enough." Wade leaned back in his chair, studying her. "But for what it's worth, I think reputation is overrated. Especially in a place like Silver Creek, where half the good people have skeletons in their closets they'd kill to keep hidden." Clara glanced up sharply. "Including you?" "Especially me." He said it without hesitation, without shame. "But we're not talking about me right now. We're talking about you and why you should stay. You have 47 minutes left to make your case." Clara pulled out her father's watch, setting it deliberately on the table between them. "I suggest you use them wisely." Wade's mouth quirked. "Has anyone ever told you you're terrifying when you're being prim?" "Frequently. Usually right before they stop listening to me entirely." "I'm listening." And the way he said it, looking directly at her with those dark, serious eyes, Clara believed him. "But before I make my case, I need to ask you something. Why San Francisco?" The question caught her off guard. It's a city. There are opportunities." "You hate cities." Wade's voice was gentle, but certain. "I've heard you talk to your students about it. You told them that cities are where people go to lose themselves in crowds, that the beauty of small towns is that everyone matters, everyone has a place. So why San Francisco?" Clara's hands tightened on her cup. "Because no one there knows me." "Exactly." Wade leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You're not running to something, Clara. You're running from the pain. And I understand that. God knows I understand that better than you might think. But here's the truth. Pain follows you. It doesn't matter if you're in Silver Creek or San Francisco or the middle of the damn ocean. If you don't deal with it, it comes with you." "And I suppose you have a better solution?" "I do, actually." He waited until she met his eyes. Stay. Face it. Let people see that Thomas Whitfield didn't break you, that their judgment doesn't define you, that you're still the same woman who fought the school board for 6 months to get a proper library. Show them that you don't need their approval or their pity. That sounds exhausting. It probably will be, Wade admitted. But you know what's more exhausting? Rebuilding your entire life in a new place while pretending the old one didn't matter. Starting over with strangers who don't know you, don't value what you do, don't understand why you wake up every morning determined to make a difference. That's exhausting, Clara, and it's wasteful. Betty returned with 2 plates piled high with eggs, bacon, and biscuits. She set them down with unnecessary gentleness, clearly trying to linger long enough to overhear something interesting. Wade thanked her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and she retreated with obvious reluctance. Clara poked at her eggs. You said the town needs me. That's a pretty bold claim from a man who barely participates in town affairs. I participate more than you think. Wade buttered a biscuit with careful precision. I just don't make a show of it. But I see things, Clara. I see how the Parker kids' reading improved this year because you spent extra time with them after school. I see how Jenny Martinez actually smiles now because you're the first teacher who didn't make her feel stupid for mixing up her English. I see how the schoolhouse has real books and maps and supplies because you pestered every business owner in town until they donated. Anyone would have done that. But they didn't. Wade's voice sharpened. Before you came, Silver Creek had a schoolhouse with 1 spelling book and a half-broken chalkboard. The previous teacher spent most of his time drunk behind the building. You changed that. You changed everything, and you're telling me that doesn't matter? Clara set down her fork, her appetite gone. It matters. But it's not enough to make up for being the town's favorite object of pity. Then change the narrative. Wade leaned forward intently. Stop being the woman Thomas Whitfield rejected and start being the woman who rejected his cowardice. Stop letting other people tell your story. That's not how society works. Society is what we make it. Wade's voice took on an edge of passion. You think I don't know about rejection? About being an outsider? Clara, I've spent 3 years in this town, and there are still people who cross the street when they see me coming. Mothers who won't let their daughters speak to me. Church ladies who pray for my immortal soul loud enough for me to hear. And you know what? I don't care, because their judgment doesn't define me. Only I get to do that. Clara stared at him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Wade Hollister wasn't just the mysterious cattleman everyone whispered about. He was someone who understood exactly what she was feeling, who'd lived through his own version of it and come out the other side still standing. What happened to you? She asked quietly. Before you came here? Wade's expression shuddered. That's a story for another time. We're talking about you. We're talking about why I should stay, and you're using yourself as an example. That makes it relevant. He was silent for a long moment, and Clara thought he might refuse to answer. But then he sighed and pushed his plate away. I was someone else before I came to Silver Creek, he said finally. Someone who lived in fancy houses and wore expensive suits and thought the world worked a certain way. And then I learned I was wrong about almost everything that mattered, and when I tried to fix it, powerful people made sure I'd pay for it. They took everything, my name, my reputation, my future, or at least the future I thought I wanted. And you came here. I came west because I had nothing left to lose and nowhere else to go. Wade's smile was bitter. Turns out, that's the most freeing feeling in the world. When you've already lost everything, there's nothing left to be afraid of. You get to decide who you want to be without the weight of expectations crushing you. Clara's throat tightened. Is that supposed to comfort me? Because it sounds terrifying. It is terrifying, Wade agreed, but it's also the truth. And you're standing at that same crossroads right now, Clara. You can run to San Francisco and try to become someone new, someone those strangers will approve of. Or you can stay here and become who you actually are, without apology. And who's that? I don't know. Wade's expression softened. But I'd like the chance to find out. And more importantly, so would your students. So would this town, if we can get our heads out of our collective asses long enough to deserve you. Against her better judgment, Clara felt something loosen in her chest. You're very convinced of your own arguments. Only because I've seen what happens when good people run. Wade's voice went quiet. They carry their ghosts with them forever. They never stop wondering what might have been if they'd stayed and fought. Don't become one of those ghosts, Clara. Don't let Thomas Whitfield and a bunch of small-minded gossips chase you away from the life you built. Clara looked down at her father's watch. 32 minutes had passed. She'd promised Wade an hour, and despite everything, she found herself wanting to give it to him. Not because his arguments were so persuasive, though they were, but because he was the first person in weeks who'd talked to her like she was a whole person rather than a tragic figure in a morality play. "Let's say I stay," she said slowly. "What then? I go back to my room at Mrs. Henderson's, I teach my classes, and I endure everyone's pity and judgment while Thomas parades his new fiancée around town. Is that what you think would happen?" "That's what has been happening." Wade shook his head. "No. That's what's been happening while you've been walking around with one foot already out the door. People can sense when someone's leaving, Clara. They pull back. They protect themselves from the loss. But if you stay, really stay, not just physically but mentally, things will change." "You're very optimistic for a man who claims not to care about society." "I'm practical," Wade corrected. "And practically speaking, Silver Creek needs a school teacher. A good one. The school board's been trying to find your replacement for 2 weeks, and nobody wants the job. We're looking at closing the school if we can't fill the position." Clara's head snapped up. "What?" "The school board. They've been interviewing candidates from Denver, but everyone they've talked to either wants twice what the town can pay or takes one look at the schoolhouse and decides they'd rather risk their fortunes in the gold fields." Wade's expression was grave. "Your students have been coming to school every day, hoping you'll change your mind. Mrs. Patterson's been teaching them herself, but she's got her own children to look after. If you don't come back, Clara, that school closes. And those kids, the ones you fought so hard for, they'll grow up without an education." Clara felt like she'd been punched. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because everyone assumed you were leaving no matter what. They didn't want to guilt you into staying." Wade's voice gentled. "But I'm telling you now because I think you deserve to know the truth. Your choice to leave isn't just about you. It's about 23 children who need you, who trust you, who think you're the bravest person they know." "I'm not brave," Clara's voice cracked. "I'm running away." "You're hurting," Wade corrected. "There's a difference, but Clara, those kids don't know that. They don't understand why their teacher suddenly decided to leave. They just know that you're going, and they're terrified that it's somehow their fault." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks now, hot and fast. "That's not fair." "No," Wade agreed quietly. "It's not. None of this is fair. Thomas treating you like you were disposable isn't fair. The town turning you into an object of gossip isn't fair. Having to choose between your own pain and those children's futures isn't fair, but that's the choice in front of you, and nobody else can make it for you." Clara wiped her eyes with her napkin, not caring that it left mascara streaks. "You play dirty, Mr. Hollister. When it matters, yes." He didn't apologize. "Do you want to know why I really stopped you this morning? I thought you told me. The children need me. The town needs me. That's all true. But it's not the real reason." Wade reached across the table and took her hand again, that same careful, gentle touch that had stopped her from boarding the train. "I stopped you because I couldn't bear to watch you disappear. Because every time I see you in town, walking to the schoolhouse, browsing at the general store, sitting alone in church, you shine, Clara. You make everything around you better just by being in it. And the thought of Silver Creek without that light." He stopped, jaw working. It felt wrong. It felt like watching something precious get thrown away. Clara's breath caught. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Wade's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "I know you deserve better than what this town's given you. I know you deserve better than Thomas Whitfield's cowardice. And I know—" His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I know that if you get on that train, you'll always wonder what might have happened if you stayed. And I think that wondering will haunt you more than any gossip ever could." They sat there in the corner of the Grand Hotel dining room, hands clasped across the table while around them the morning business of Silver Creek continued. Betty refilled coffee cups and cast curious glances their way. The ranch hands finished their breakfast and left, whispering to each other. More people trickled in, and Clara felt the weight of their stares, but somehow it didn't feel as crushing as before. Maybe it was Wade's hand in hers. Maybe it was his words still echoing in her mind. Or maybe it was the simple fact that someone had finally asked her to stay, not out of duty or pity, but because he genuinely believed she mattered. "My hour's not up yet," Clara said finally, her voice steadier now. "What else do you have to say?" Wade's smile was small but genuine. "Actually, I have a proposition for you, but you're not going to like it. Try me. Come out to my ranch today. Let me show you something." He squeezed her hand gently. "And before you say no, hear me out. There's something I've been working on, something that involves the school, and I want your opinion on it. Professional opinion," he added quickly. "Nothing improper." Clara raised an eyebrow. "You're asking me to go to your ranch, alone, with you, the same man who decent women allegedly cross the street to avoid." "I am," Wade agreed without shame. "And yes, people will talk. They'll add it to the list of scandals attached to your name. But Clara, they're already talking. They're going to talk whether you run to San Francisco or stay in Silver Creek. The question is, are you going to let their talking control your life? Or are you going to make your own decisions?" "That's manipulative. That's honest." Wade didn't let go of her hand. "I have something to show you that I think will change your mind about leaving. But I can't bring it here, and I can't explain it properly without you seeing it. So I'm asking you to trust me, the mysterious, possibly dangerous cattleman, for a few more hours. Give me until sunset. If you still want to leave after that, I'll personally ensure you get the best ticket money can buy and a first-class escort to San Francisco." Clara studied his face, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. But all she saw was sincerity and something else, something that looked almost like hope. She was insane for even considering this. She should demand he take her back to the boarding house, should pack what remained of her belongings, should find a way to the next train station and resume her escape from Silver Creek and all its painful memories. But Thomas Whitfield had already made her feel small. The town's gossips had already made her feel ashamed, and Clara Whitmore was discovering, in this moment with Wade Hollister's calloused hand wrapped around hers, that she was tired of letting other people's opinions dictate her choices. "Until sunset," she said firmly. "But Mr. Hollister, if this turns out to be some scheme to compromise my reputation further—" "Wade," he interrupted, "if we're going to scandalize the town together, you should probably call me Wade." "Wade," Clara corrected, and was surprised to find the name felt natural on her tongue. "If this is a scheme, it's not a scheme. I promise you that." Wade stood, still holding her hand, and pulled her gently to her feet. "It's actually something much simpler and potentially much more difficult than a scheme." "Which is?" "Hope," Wade said simply. "I'm offering you hope, Clara. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept it." Clara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the dangerous reputation and the mysterious past to the man beneath. And what she saw there was someone who understood loss, who'd survived it, who'd built something new from the ashes of whatever he'd been before. Someone who believed she could do the same. "All right," she heard herself say. "Show me your hope, Wade Hollister. Let's see if it's worth staying for." The smile that crossed his face was like watching the sun come out from behind clouds, warm and bright and completely transforming. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You won't regret this." Clara wasn't sure she believed him, but as Wade left money on the table to cover their breakfast and guided her toward the door with that same protective, not quite touching hover of his hand near her elbow, she felt something shift inside her. She'd missed her train this morning. She'd let Wade Hollister talk her out of her carefully planned escape. She'd agreed to go to his ranch, alone, despite every rule of propriety she'd ever been taught. Clara Whitmore, Silver Creek's sensible schoolteacher, was apparently capable of being completely reckless. And the strangest part was, it felt like the first honest thing she'd done in months. The ride to Wade's ranch took them through the heart of Silver Creek, and Clara felt every single pair of eyes that followed their progress down Main Street. Wade had brought a wagon rather than a buggy, practical rather than romantic. But that didn't stop Mrs. Patterson from actually stopping mid-stride on the sidewalk to stare, her mouth forming a perfect O of shock. Across the street, Reverend Morrison paused in his conversation with the butcher, his expression caught somewhere between concern and disapproval. Clara kept her spine straight and her eyes forward, but her cheeks burned. Wade seemed completely unaffected, guiding the horses with easy confidence, occasionally nodding to people they passed as if this were the most natural thing in the world, taking the town's disgraced schoolteacher out to his isolated ranch the very morning she was supposed to leave town forever. "You could at least pretend to be uncomfortable," Clara muttered as they passed the general store, where 3 women had congregated by the window to watch them pass. "Why?" Wade glanced at her, genuinely curious. "We're not doing anything wrong. We're flouting every rule of proper conduct that exists." "Whose rules?" Wade asked mildly. "The same people who decided you should be ashamed because Thomas Whitfield couldn't stand up to his mother? The same folks who'd rather gossip about your heartbreak than actually offer you support? Those rules?" Clara opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. He had a point, damn him. They left town behind, following a dirt road that wound through grassland dotted with cattle. The morning had turned beautiful, the mist burned away by strong September sun, and despite everything, Clara felt something in her chest begin to ease. Out here, away from watching eyes and wagging tongues, she could almost breathe. "How far is your ranch?" she asked. "About 4 miles from town. Far enough for privacy, close enough to be useful." Wade guided the horses around a curve in the road. "I've got about 300 acres. It's not the biggest spread in Colorado, but it's mine." There was something in the way he said that last word, mine, that spoke of hard-won ownership. Clara studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands held the reins with practiced ease. "You said you were someone else before you came here," she said carefully. "Someone who lived in fancy houses and wore expensive suits." "I did say that." "That's not much of an explanation." Wade was quiet for a long moment, and Clara thought he might refuse to elaborate. But then he sighed, his shoulders dropping slightly. "My name used to be Wade Hollister Easton," he said. "The Easton part mattered more than you might think. My father built a shipping empire in Boston. Warehouses, ships, trade routes from Europe to the Americas. When I was growing up, people knew the Easton name. It meant something." "What happened?" "My father died when I was 22, and I inherited everything. The company, the reputation, the responsibility." Wade's voice went flat. "I thought I was ready. I thought I understood the business. Turns out, I didn't understand anything about the men my father had partnered with, men who'd been embezzling from the company for years, using our legitimate shipping routes to move illegal goods, bribing customs officials. When I found out and threatened to expose them, they moved first." Clara drew in a sharp breath. "They framed you." "They were very good at it," Wade said quietly. "Made it look like I was the one behind the embezzlement, the smuggling, all of it. By the time I realized what was happening, half of Boston society believed I'd betrayed my father's legacy. The other half believed I was continuing his work, that he'd been corrupt too, and I was just following in his footsteps. But surely you could prove—" "I tried." Wade's hands tightened on the reins. "Spent everything I had left on lawyers, investigators, trying to clear my name. But the men I was up against had money and power and connections that went all the way to City Hall. Every witness I found suddenly couldn't remember what they'd seen. Every document I needed mysteriously disappeared. And all the while the newspapers were having a field day with the story of young Wade Easton, the privileged heir who'd destroyed his father's empire through greed and incompetence." "So you ran." "I retreated," Wade corrected. "There's a difference. I sold what assets I could salvage, gathered what money wasn't tied up in lawsuits, and I came west, dropped the Easton name, kept the Hollister, and started over where nobody knew me or cared about Boston shipping magnates." He glanced at her. "Sound familiar?" Clara's throat tightened. "That's why you stopped me this morning, because you know what it's like to run from a ruined reputation." "I know what it's like to let other people's lies define you," Wade said. "And I know what it cost me. I left behind friends who might have stood by me if I'd stayed and fought. I abandoned the workers who depended on the Easton Company for their livelihoods. I let the corrupt bastards who destroyed my father's legacy win, because facing them felt too hard, too painful, too impossible." "You couldn't have won. You said they had all the power." "Maybe not," Wade agreed. "But I'll never know, will I? Because I ran before the fight was really over. And that's the thing that haunts me, Clara. Not the loss of money or status or reputation, the wondering, the question of what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to stay." The wagon crested a small rise, and suddenly Wade's ranch spread out before them. Clara caught her breath. She'd expected something rough and basic, a simple house, maybe a barn, the kind of minimal setup most cattlemen maintained. But what she saw was something else entirely. The main house was beautiful, built of honey-colored wood with a wide porch that wrapped around three sides. Flower boxes hung beneath the windows, actual flowers blooming cheerfully in the September sun. Beyond the house sat a barn painted deep red, several outbuildings in good repair, and extensive corrals where horses grazed peacefully. But what caught Claire's attention was the building off to the left, set slightly apart from the other structures. It was smaller than the barn, but larger than any of the outbuildings, with large windows that caught the morning light and a fresh coat of white paint that practically glowed. It looked new, recently constructed, and completely out of place on a working cattle ranch. "What is that?" Clara asked. Wade pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the main house, his expression carefully neutral. "That's what I wanted to show you. But first—" He climbed down and came around to help her descend, his hands firm at her waist. "I need you to come meet some people." Before Clara could ask what he meant, the door of the main house opened and children spilled out like water from a broken dam. 6 of them, ranging in age from perhaps 5 to 14, all talking at once, all rushing toward Wade with the easy familiarity of long acquaintance. "Mr. Wade! Mr. Wade, you're back. Did you go to town? Did you bring supplies? Maria said you'd be gone all day, but you're here already." Wade laughed. Actually laughed, a sound Clara had never heard from him before, and ruffled the hair of the nearest child, a boy of about 8 with a gap-toothed grin. "Easy, easy. Yes, I went to town. No, I didn't bring supplies yet. I'll go back later. And I'm here because I brought someone I wanted you all to meet." 6 pairs of eyes swiveled to Clara with undisguised curiosity. She felt suddenly exposed, aware of her rumpled traveling dress, her tear-streaked face from the hotel, the general disaster of her morning. "Children," Wade said, his voice taking on a formal tone that didn't quite hide his affection. "This is Miss Clara Whitmore. She's the school teacher in Silver Creek. Miss Whitmore, these are—" He pointed to each child in turn. "Manuel, Sophia, James, little Maria, Catherine, and Thomas." The last name made Clara's heart clench, but this Thomas was nothing like his namesake. He was maybe 14, tall and gangly, with serious eyes and dirt under his fingernails. He gave her a solemn nod. "Pleased to meet you, ma'am," he said, and the other children echoed him with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Clara looked from the children to Wade, confused. "I didn't know you had—" "They're not mine," Wade said quickly. "Well, not in the traditional sense. These are the children of my ranch hands. Most of the families who work here live on the property. It's easier than trying to commute from town every day, and it means the kids can help with chores when needed." A woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. She was perhaps 40, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and the kind of weathered face that spoke of years working outdoors. "Mr. Hollister, I told them to give you space, but you know how they are when you've been gone." She stopped, seeing Clara. "Oh, I didn't realize we had a guest." "Maria, this is Miss Whitmore. Clara, Maria Torres runs this household better than I ever could and keeps everyone fed and organized. I'd be lost without her." Maria's eyes sharpened with recognition. "The teacher from town. I've heard the children speak of you." She didn't say what else she'd heard, but Clara felt the weight of it anyway, the gossip, the scandal, the whispers that had surely reached even out here. "It's nice to meet you," Clara said, feeling awkward and out of place. "Miss Whitmore is going to stay for the day," Wade announced, causing all 6 children and Maria to stare at him with varying expressions of surprise. "I'm going to show her the new building." The schoolhouse. Little Maria, who couldn't have been more than 5, bounced on her toes. "Is she going to teach us? Are we going to have a real school?" Clara's confusion must have shown on her face because Wade took her elbow gently and steered her away from the house. "Let me show you," he said. "Then it'll make sense." They walked across the yard toward the white building with the big windows. Behind them, Clara could hear the children whispering excitedly and Maria shushing them with limited success. Her heart was pounding, though she couldn't have said exactly why. Wade opened the door to the building and stood back to let her enter first. Clara stepped inside and stopped dead. It was a schoolroom, A perfect, beautiful, fully equipped schoolroom. Desks arranged in neat rows, enough for at least 20 students. A large chalkboard mounted on the front wall. Bookshelves already filled with primers, readers, and textbooks that looked brand new. Maps hanging on the walls showing the United States, the world, the Colorado Territory in detail. A globe on a stand near the window. Slates and chalk arranged on a supply table. Even a small pot-bellied stove in the corner for winter heating. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Wade, what is this? He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. It's a school for the children who live on the ranch and the neighboring properties. There are 14 kids within 5 miles of here, all under the age of 15, and the nearest school is Silver Creek, too far for them to travel daily, especially in winter. Clara turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. You built this? The structure was finished 2 weeks ago. I've been furnishing it since then, ordering supplies from Denver, trying to get everything right. Wade moved into the room, running his hand along one of the desks. These families work hard, Clara. They're good people trying to build lives out here. But their children are growing up without education, without opportunities, because there's no school close enough for them to attend. I wanted to change that. This must have cost a fortune. I have the money, Wade said simply. What I don't have is a teacher. Clara's heart stopped. She turned to face him fully, understanding dawning. That's why you brought me here. Partially. Wade met her eyes steadily. I was going to approach you about this eventually anyway. I've been watching how you teach, Clara. The way you make learning exciting for the kids, the way you adapt your lessons to each child's needs, the way you fight for them. I wanted someone like that for this school. Someone who sees teaching as a calling, not just a job. And then Thomas broke our engagement. And then Thomas proved he's an idiot, Wade corrected. But yes, when I heard you were planning to leave, I knew I had to act faster than I'd intended. These children need a teacher, Clara. They need you. But more than that, he stepped closer, his expression intense. I think you need them too. I think you need a place where you can teach without the school board breathing down your neck, where you can try new approaches without worrying about offending the sensibilities of Mrs. Patterson or Mrs. Whitfield or whoever else has opinions about proper education. A place where your work is valued without conditions or judgment. Clara sank into one of the chairs. Teacher size, she noted absently, positioned at the front of the room where she could see all her students. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you freedom, Wade said quietly. A chance to teach the way you've always wanted to teach, without interference. A salary that's better than what Silver Creek pays. A place where your past doesn't matter, only your ability. A fresh start that doesn't require running away. It was too much. The beautiful schoolroom, the eager children outside, Wade's steady certainty that she was capable of this, the sheer overwhelming possibility of it all. Clara felt tears prick her eyes again. The children in Silver Creek still need a teacher, Wade acknowledged. And I'm not saying you have to choose one group over the other. If you wanted to teach in town during the regular school year and come out here for summer sessions, we could make that work. Or you could teach here full-time and let Silver Creek find someone else. Or, he crouched down beside her chair, bringing himself to eye level. Or you could do something completely different that we haven't thought of yet. The point is, Clara, you have options. You're not trapped. You don't have to run to San Francisco to escape your circumstances. You can reshape your circumstances right here. Why are you doing this? Clara whispered. Why do you care so much? Wade was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was trying to memorize it. Remember when I said I know what it's like to let other people's lies define you? I also know what it's like to have someone believe in you when you've stopped believing in yourself. When I came west, broken and bitter and convinced I was worthless, a man gave me a job on his ranch. Didn't ask about my past, didn't care about rumors, just saw that I was willing to work hard and gave me a chance. He died 2 years ago, left me this property in his will because I was the closest thing to family he had. Said I reminded him of himself, someone who'd been kicked down by life and needed space to stand back up. And now you're doing the same for me. I'm offering you the same chance I was given, Wade corrected. What you do with it is entirely up to you. But Clara, I've watched you for 2 years. I've seen your strength, your compassion, your absolute refusal to give up on children everyone else has written off. You're extraordinary, even if Thomas Whitfield was too blind to see it, and the thought of you wasting that gift in San Francisco, teaching children who already have every advantage, while the kids out here go without. He shook his head. It would be a crime. Clara looked around the schoolroom again, imagining it filled with students. Manuel working on his arithmetic, Sophia reading aloud, little Maria learning her letters. She thought about the children in Silver Creek, her current students who'd depended on her, who'd trusted her. She thought about Thomas and his new fiancée, about Mrs. Whitfield's barely concealed contempt, about all the gossip and judgment that had made her want to flee. Then she thought about what Wade had said at the hotel. Pain follows you. It doesn't matter if you're in Silver Creek or San Francisco or the middle of the damn ocean. If you don't deal with it, it comes with you. I don't know if I can do this, she said honestly. Teaching here would mean facing everyone in town who pitied me or judged me. It would mean staying in a place where I'll constantly run into reminders of my humiliation. It would mean choosing courage over comfort, Wade finished. It would mean deciding that your work matters more than other people's opinions. It would mean giving these children a chance they won't get any other way. He paused. But Clara, I need you to understand something. I'm not asking you to do this for me or even for these kids, although God knows they need you. I'm asking you to do this for yourself. To prove to yourself that Thomas Whitfield and his mother and every gossip in Silver Creek couldn't break you. To prove that you're stronger than their judgment. A knock on the door frame made them both look up. It was Thomas, the teenage Thomas, not Clara's ex, standing awkwardly in the entrance. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Wade, but Maria says lunch is ready if you and the lady want to eat. We'll be right there, Wade said, standing. He offered Clara his hand. Come have lunch with us. Get to know the children. See what this could be like. You don't have to decide anything today. Clara took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. She was acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the calluses on his palm, of the way he looked at her like she was something precious and powerful all at once. This is a lot to process, she admitted. I know, but you have time. The rest of the day, remember? Sunset was our agreement. Wade's smile was gentle. Come eat some of Maria's cooking. It'll help you think. Lunch was served family-style around a large table in Wade's kitchen, and it was unlike any meal Clara had experienced in years. Maria had made chicken with rice and beans, and there was fresh bread that filled the house with warmth. The children chattered constantly, talking over each other, telling stories, arguing good-naturedly about chores and games and who got to sit where. Wade presided over the chaos with easy authority, settling disputes with a few words, asking questions that got quieter children to open up, making sure everyone had enough to eat. Watching him, Clara saw a completely different man than the mysterious, somewhat dangerous figure who'd haunted the edges of Silver Creek society. This Wade was relaxed, affectionate, clearly beloved by the children, and respected by Maria and the other adults who filtered in and out during the meal. Miss Whitmore, Sophia said suddenly, fixing Clara with an intense gaze, is it true you have 100 books at the school in town? Not quite 100, Clara said, smiling, but we do have a nice library now. Do you like to read? Sophia's face lit up. I love reading, but we only have 3 books here, and I've read them all 6 times. Mama says we can't afford more right now because Papa needs new tools for the fall harvest. What kind of books do you like? Adventure stories, Sophia said promptly, and stories about girls who do brave things. Thomas lets me read his cowboy books sometimes, but they're all about boys. There are wonderful books about brave girls, Clara told her. Have you ever heard of Little Women? Sophia shook her head, eyes wide. It's about 4 sisters who have adventures and learn and grow up together. One of them wants to be a writer, one wants to be an actress, one wants to be a proper lady, and one wants to, well, you'd have to read it to find out. Clara found herself leaning forward, caught up in Sophia's enthusiasm. If I were to teach here, I could bring books like that. We could read them together, discuss them, maybe even act out scenes. Really? Sophia looked like Clara had just promised her the moon. Manuel piped up. Would you teach us geography? I want to know about all the places in the world. Mr. Wade says there are cities so big you can't walk across them in a whole day. And mathematics, Thomas added quietly. I want to learn real mathematics, Not just figuring out how many cattle we have. I want to understand engineering, maybe build bridges someday. Little Maria tugged on Clara's sleeve. Would you teach me to write my name? Mama showed me the letters, but I can't make them all fit together right. Of course I would, Clara said, her throat suddenly tight. I'd teach you anything you wanted to learn. The children erupted into excited chatter, already planning their lessons, arguing about who would sit where in the new schoolroom, debating whether they'd have homework. Clara watched them and felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight knot of pain she'd carried since Thomas's betrayal. These children didn't care about her broken engagement. They didn't judge her for being publicly humiliated. They just saw a teacher who might open worlds for them, who might give them chances they'd never have otherwise. And looking at their eager faces, Clara realized she'd been so focused on her own pain that she'd nearly missed this opportunity to do something that actually mattered. After lunch, Wade gave Clara a tour of the ranch while the children scattered to their afternoon chores. They walked through the barn, where horses nickered softly in their stalls, past the corrals where cattle grazed peacefully, along a creek that marked the western edge of the property, its water clear and cold even in September. It's beautiful here, Clara said, meaning it. Peaceful. It is now, Wade agreed. Took me 2 years of hard work to make it this way. When I bought the property, half the fences were down, the barn was falling apart, and the house had a hole in the roof you could drive a wagon through. But I needed the work, needed something to pour myself into that wasn't rage or grief or self-pity. They stopped by the creek, and Clara sat on a large flat rock near the water's edge. Wade settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Can I ask you something? Clara said after a moment. Anything. Why didn't you fight harder? In Boston, I mean. You said you hired lawyers and investigators, but then you gave up and came west. Why? Wade was quiet for so long Clara thought he might not answer, but then he sighed, picking up a smooth stone and turning it over in his hands. Because I was tired, he said finally. Because every day felt like drowning. Because the people I thought were my friends turned their backs the moment my reputation was questioned. Because the woman I'd been courting, Margaret Caldwell, daughter of a prominent judge, ended our relationship with a letter saying she couldn't be associated with scandal. He smiled bitterly. Sound familiar? Thomas at least had the decency to tell me to my face. Did he? Or did he just have less courage than Margaret? Wade shook his head. The point is, I gave up because fighting felt impossible. Every door I knocked on slammed shut. Every attempt to clear my name just made the scandal worse. And eventually, I convinced myself that maybe they were right. Maybe I was incompetent. Maybe I had failed my father's legacy. Maybe I deserved everything that happened. But you didn't, Clara said fiercely. You were framed. You were a victim of corrupt men who— I know that now, Wade interrupted gently. But at the time, when everyone around you is telling you you're worthless, it's hard not to believe them. Especially when you're already grieving your father, already overwhelmed by responsibility you never wanted, already questioning every decision you've ever made. It's easy to internalize that judgment, Clara, to let it become the truth you tell yourself. Clara stared at the water, watching it flow endlessly over smooth rocks. Is that what I'm doing? Internalizing everyone's judgment? I think you're trying not to, Wade said. I think that's why you decided to leave, because you wanted to escape before you started believing what they were saying about you. But Clara, running doesn't work. It just means you carry their voices with you to wherever you go. So what's the alternative? Stay here and let them judge me every day? Stay here and prove them wrong. Wade shifted to face her more fully. Teach those children in that schoolhouse. Do work you're proud of. Build a life that has nothing to do with Thomas Whitfield or his opinions or anyone else's narrow-minded gossip. And eventually, they'll either come around or they won't. But either way, their judgment won't matter anymore because you'll have created something real and meaningful that exists entirely separate from them. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, Wade admitted. It's probably the hardest thing you'll ever do, but I think you're capable of it. I think you're capable of extraordinary things, Clara Whitmore, if you can just get past the fear. Clara met his eyes, those dark, serious eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed walls. What if I fail? Then you fail, Wade said simply, and you pick yourself up and try again. That's what I did. That's what everyone who's ever done anything worthwhile has had to do. Failure isn't the end of the world, Clara. It's just part of the process. Easy for you to say. You've already been through the worst of it. Wade's laugh was hollow. Have I? Clara, I still wake up some mornings wondering if I made the right choice leaving Boston. I still wonder if I should have fought harder, stayed longer, refused to give them the satisfaction of running me out. I still carry guilt about the workers who lost their jobs when the company folded, about the friends who might have stood by me if I'd given them the chance. The pain doesn't just disappear because you move west and buy a ranch. It just becomes part of your story instead of the whole story. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the creek and the distant sounds of the ranch. Clara thought about her students in Silver Creek, wondered what they were doing right now, whether they'd noticed she wasn't on the train she was supposed to have taken. She thought about the schoolhouse Wade had built, about Sophia's eager face when discussing books, about little Maria wanting to learn to write her name. She thought about Thomas Whitfield and his new fiancée, about Mrs. Whitfield's thin-lipped disapproval, about all the gossip and shame she'd been running from. And she realized, with startling clarity, that Wade was right. None of it would matter in San Francisco. She'd still be the woman whose engagement had been broken. She'd still carry that wound. The only difference would be that in San Francisco she'd be alone with it. Here, at least, she had work that mattered, children who needed her. And apparently she had Wade Hollister, a man who understood loss and survival and the courage it took to rebuild. The school board in Silver Creek, she said slowly. If I decided to teach out here instead, they'd probably never forgive me. Mrs. Patterson would say I abandoned my post. Mrs. Whitfield would claim I was too unstable to be trusted with children. The gossip would be worse than ever. Probably, Wade agreed. Does that change your decision? Clara drew in a deep breath, feeling something settle in her chest, a certainty she hadn't felt in weeks. I need to go back to town. Today. I need to talk to the school board, to my students, to everyone who needs to hear this from me directly. I need to face them, Wade. Not run from them, not hide out here. Actually face them and tell them what I'm choosing and why. Wade's smile was slow and genuine. That's my girl. I'm not your girl, Clara said automatically, but there was no heat in it. Not yet, Wade murmured, so quietly she almost missed it. Then louder. When do you want to go back? Now, this afternoon. Clara stood, brushing dust from her skirt. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to choose courage over comfort, then I need to start immediately, before I lose my nerve. All right. Wade stood beside her. But Clara, before we go, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this to trap you here or to make you feel obligated to me. If you decide after talking to the school board that you still want to leave, that you want to try San Francisco or Denver or anywhere else, I'll support that choice. The job here will remain open either way. I'm not going to make your decisions for you or pressure you into something you don't want. I know. And she did know, Clara realized. Despite his desperate plea on the train platform that morning, despite bringing her here and showing her the schoolhouse, Wade was offering her genuine choice. Not manipulation, not obligation, just possibility. They walked back to the main house to find the children waiting somewhat impatiently, clearly having been told to stay out of the way but dying to know what was happening. When Clara and Wade emerged from the creek path, little Maria rushed forward. Are you going to be our teacher? She demanded. Mama said we have to wait and see, but I want to know now. Clara crouched down to meet the little girl's eyes. I need to take care of some things in town first, she said honestly. But yes, Maria, I think I am going to be your teacher, if you'll have me. The cheer that went up from the children could probably be heard back in Silver Creek. Sophia grabbed Clara's hand and squeezed it, her eyes shining with excitement. Manuel was already asking when they'd start lessons. Thomas gave her that solemn nod again, but there was approval in it now, a recognition that she'd passed some kind of test. Maria Torres emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron again, apparently her default gesture. You're sure about this, Miss Whitmore? Teaching out here is different from town teaching. These children have chores, responsibilities. Some days they'll be too tired from ranch work to focus on lessons. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing is easy, Clara said, surprised by her own certainty. But yes, Mrs. Torres, I'm sure. Maria studied her for a long moment, then nodded sharply. Good. These children need someone who will fight for them the way you fight. Welcome to the ranch, Miss Whitmore. The ride back to Silver Creek felt different than the morning journey out. Clara sat straighter, her hands folded calmly in her lap rather than clenched in anxiety. She wasn't running anymore. She was returning with purpose, with a plan, with something worth fighting for. "What will you say to them?" Wade asked as they neared town. "The truth," Clara said simply, "that I'm grateful for my time teaching in Silver Creek, but I've been offered an opportunity that better serves my goals as an educator. That the children on the ranches surrounding yours deserve access to quality education just as much as town children do. That I'm choosing to teach where I can make the most difference." They won't like it. Probably not. But Wade, you were right about something. I've been so focused on what everyone else thought about me, on managing their opinions and living up to their expectations, that I forgot to consider what I actually want. What matters to me? Teaching those children in that beautiful schoolhouse you built, that matters to me. It matters more than social approval, or avoiding gossip, or making sure Thomas Whitfield feels comfortable when he sees me in town. Wade glanced at her, and there was something in his expression that made Clara's breath catch. Pride, yes, but also something warmer, something that made her very aware of how close they were sitting in the wagon, how his arm occasionally brushed hers as he guided the horses. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think you're making the right choice. And I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met." "I'm terrified," Clara admitted. "Brave and terrified aren't mutually exclusive." Wade's smile was crooked. "I'm pretty sure they're actually the same thing most of the time." They reached the edge of town just as the afternoon was beginning to fade toward evening. The streets were busier now, people finishing their workdays, running errands, gathering in small clusters to talk. Clara saw more than one person stop and stare as Wade's wagon rolled past, saw the whispers starting, the speculation building. Let them talk, she thought. Let them wonder. She had more important things to do than manage their gossip. "Where should I take you?" Wade asked. "Mrs. Henderson's boarding house," Clara decided. "I need to speak with her first, then I'll visit the school board." She hesitated. "Wade, thank you. For this morning, for everything. You didn't have to—" "Yes, I did," Wade interrupted. "Clara, I know we barely know each other. I know this whole day has been strange and improper and probably ill-advised by every social standard that exists, but I don't regret a single moment of it, and I hope you don't either." "I don't," Clara said honestly. Then, before she could lose her nerve, "Will you come to dinner tomorrow at the boarding house? Mrs. Henderson allows her residents to have guests on Friday evenings. We could discuss the details of the teaching arrangement, logistics, that sort of thing." Wade's expression softened into something that might have been delight. "I'd like that very much." He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of Mrs. Henderson's establishment, a tidy two-story house with a well-kept garden and lace curtains in the windows. Several of those curtains twitched as Clara climbed down, and she could practically feel the eyes watching, the minds already racing to conclusions. Wade handed down her carpet bag, the same bag she'd been planning to take to San Francisco that morning a lifetime ago. "Good luck," he said. "Though I don't think you'll need it. You've got this, Clara." "I hope you're right." "I'm always right," Wade said with mock seriousness. Then before Clara could respond, he tipped his hat to her and drove away, leaving her standing on the sidewalk with her bag and her racing heart and a future that looked nothing like what she'd planned 24 hours ago. Clara drew in a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and marched up Mrs. Henderson's front steps. The landlady opened the door before Clara could knock, her face a mixture of relief and confusion. "Miss Whitmore, we thought you'd left on the morning train. Your trunk is still here, yes. I decided not to go." Clara stepped inside, setting down her bag. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to speak with you about my room. I'd like to keep it for at least another month while I make arrangements." Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. "You're staying in Silver Creek?" "Not exactly," Clara said. "I've accepted a teaching position at a ranch school, but I'll need somewhere to stay when I'm in town for meetings and supplies. If my room is still available—" "Of course it is. I was heartbroken when I thought you were leaving, dear. You've been such a lovely tenant." Mrs. Henderson paused, curiosity getting the better of her. "A ranch school, you said? Whose ranch?" "Wade Hollister's." Clara said it clearly. refusing to drop her eyes or act ashamed. He's built a schoolhouse for the children whose families work his land and the surrounding properties. He's asked me to teach there, and I've agreed. Mrs. Henderson's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Wade Hollister, the cattleman, the one who, well, the one people gossip about, yes, Clara finished calmly. But he's also a man who's invested his own money in education for children who would otherwise have none. A man who believes that all children deserve opportunities, regardless of their circumstances. I visited the schoolhouse today, met the children, and I believe this is where I can do the most good. But Miss Whitmore, what will people say? First the broken engagement, and now associating so closely with Mr. Hollister. Let them say whatever they like, Clara interrupted, and was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Mrs. Henderson, I've spent weeks worrying about what people would say, trying to minimize the scandal, trying to make myself small enough that no one would notice me. And where did it get me? I was about to run away from everything I've built here, everything I care about, just to escape other people's judgment. Wade Hollister showed me this morning that there's another option. Stop caring about the judgment and start caring about the work. Mrs. Henderson stared at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in her expression, a kind of respect Clara hadn't seen before. You know what, dear? I think you're absolutely right. You're a wonderful teacher, and if Mr. Hollister is smart enough to recognize that and offer you a position, then good for him, and good for you for having the courage to accept it. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Between you and me, I never understood what you saw in Thomas Whitfield anyway. Man's got no spine. Clara felt a surprised laugh bubble up. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Your room will be here whenever you need it. Now, you said something about meetings with the school board? Yes. I need to speak with them before word spreads through town. They deserve to hear my decision directly. The board usually meets on Thursday evenings, but I believe Mr. Patterson is at the general store right now if you wanted to catch him. Mrs. Henderson hesitated. Miss Whitmore, are you sure about this? Once you make this announcement, there's no taking it back. I know, Clara said, and yes, I'm sure. She found Harold Patterson at the general store, deep in conversation with the owner about feed prices. He looked up when Clara entered, and his expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and wariness in rapid succession. Miss Whitmore, I thought you were leaving town. I was. I changed my mind. Clara approached him directly, refusing to let her nervousness show. Mr. Patterson, I need to speak with you about my position at the school. Is there somewhere we can talk privately? Patterson exchanged a glance with the store owner, then gestured toward the back room. We can talk in the office. They settled into 2 chairs in the cramped space that served as the store's office, and Clara folded her hands in her lap, calling on every ounce of composure she possessed. I'm resigning from my position at the Silver Creek School, she said without preamble. Effective immediately. Patterson's face went red. You're what? I've been offered a teaching position at a private ranch school, and I've decided to accept it. I wanted to inform you directly before word spread through town. A ranch school? Patterson sputtered. What ranch school? There is no ranch school. There is now. Wade Hollister has built a schoolhouse on his property for the children whose families work in the area. He's asked me to teach there, and I believe it's where I can do the most good. Patterson's expression darkened. Wade Hollister. Of course. Miss Whitmore, have you lost your mind? The man's reputation is based largely on speculation and prejudice, Clara interrupted calmly. I visited his ranch today. I've seen the schoolhouse he's built. I've met the children who will be my students. Everything about the opportunity is legitimate and appropriate, and frankly, Mr. Patterson, it's a better situation than what I have here. Better? You have a stable position, a salary, a place in this community? A place as the object of pity and gossip, Clara said flatly. Mr. Patterson, let's be honest with each other. Since my engagement ended, this town has treated me like a scandal waiting to happen. Half the mothers are afraid I'll corrupt their children with my instability. The other half won't meet my eyes out of embarrassment. The school board has been looking for my replacement since before I even announced my intention to leave. Don't pretend this community has offered me anything worth staying for. Patterson had the grace to look uncomfortable. There's been some unfortunate talk, But Miss Whitmore, running off to Wade Hollister's ranch isn't going to help your reputation. I'm not running, I'm choosing. There's a difference. Clara leaned forward. Mr. Patterson, those children need me. 14 children who would otherwise have no access to education because they live too far from town to attend school regularly. Children whose parents are hardworking ranchers and farmers who want better futures for their kids. I can make a real difference in their lives, probably more than I ever could here, where my every move is scrutinized and judged. Why would I turn down that opportunity just to preserve a reputation that's already been shredded? Because it's the right thing to do. Because Patterson stopped, seeming to realize how his argument sounded. What about your students here, the children who depend on you? The school board has been interviewing replacement teachers for 2 weeks, Clara pointed out. Surely one of them can step in. Or perhaps Mrs. Patterson would be willing to continue teaching until a permanent replacement is found. She's been managing the classroom since I gave notice, hasn't she? Patterson deflated slightly. She has, and she's managing. Then the children will be fine. And Mr. Patterson, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know this creates difficulties for the board, but I have to make the choice that's right for me, not the choice that's most convenient for everyone else. They sat in silence for a moment, and Clara could see Patterson struggling between his duty to the school and his recognition that she had a point. Finally, he sighed. I won't pretend I'm happy about this, Miss Whitmore, but I suppose we can't force you to stay. He paused. For what it's worth, you've been a good teacher. The best we've had in years. It's a shame to lose you, whatever the circumstances. Thank you. Clara stood, offering her hand. I'll collect my personal belongings from the schoolhouse tomorrow, if that's acceptable. Patterson shook her hand reluctantly. That's fine, but Miss Whitmore, be careful. Wade Hollister may seem respectable, but there are things about his past, rumors, are just rumors, Clara finished firmly. Goodbye, Mr. Patterson. Please give my regards to your wife. She left the store feeling lighter than she had in weeks. One difficult conversation down, several more to go. But she'd done it. She'd faced Harold Patterson and stated her choice clearly, without apology or shame. And if she could do that, she could face anyone. The news spread through Silver Creek like wildfire, just as Clara had known it would. By the time she walked back to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, she could feel the weight of stares following her down the street. Curtains twitched in windows. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as she passed. She heard her name whispered more than once, always followed by Wade's, always with that particular tone that suggested scandal. Clara kept her head high and her steps steady. She'd made her choice. Let them talk. That evening, she sat down at the small desk in her room and wrote letters to her students' parents, explaining her decision with as much grace and diplomacy as she could manage. She told them about the ranch school, about the children who needed education, about her belief that this was where she could do the most good. She thanked them for trusting her with their children and assured them that Mrs. Patterson would continue to provide excellent instruction until a permanent replacement was found. She did not apologize. She did not explain about Thomas or the gossip or the pain that had nearly driven her from Silver Creek entirely. Those things were her own, and she refused to make them part of this professional transition. It was past midnight when she finally set down her pen, her hand cramping from writing. Tomorrow she would deliver the letters. Tomorrow she would face her students one last time. Tomorrow she would begin the difficult work of standing firm in her choice while the town judged her for it. But tonight, she let herself feel the full weight of what she'd done. She'd turned down escape. She'd chosen the harder path. She'd allied herself with a man the town distrusted, accepted a position that would fuel gossip for months, and committed herself to a future that looked nothing like the safe, respectable life she'd imagined when Thomas had proposed. And somehow, despite the fear and uncertainty, Clara felt more herself than she had in years. The next morning dawned gray and cool, promising rain before evening. Clara dressed carefully in her most professional outfit, a navy dress with a high collar and practical boots, and braided her hair into a severe knot at the base of her neck. If she was going to face her students and their parents, she wanted to look like the competent educator she was, not the heartbroken woman people seemed to think she'd become. She arrived at the schoolhouse just as the morning bell was ringing. her arms full of the letters she'd written and a box for her personal belongings. The children were already streaming inside, their voices loud and excited in that particular way of Friday mornings when the weekend felt tantalizingly close. Several of them saw Clara and stopped dead, confusion and hope warring on their faces. "Miss Whitmore!" Jenny Martinez ran forward, her dark braids flying. "You're back! Mama said you went away, but I told her you wouldn't leave without saying goodbye." Clara's heart clenched. She crouched down to meet Jenny's eyes, aware that other children were gathering around, that Mrs. Patterson had appeared in the schoolhouse doorway looking stunned. "You're right, Jenny. I wouldn't leave without saying goodbye." Clara smiled, though it hurt. "Can you do me a favor? Can you help me gather everyone inside? I need to talk to all of you." 10 minutes later, 23 children sat at their desks, silent for perhaps the first time all year. Mrs. Patterson stood at the back of the room, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Clara stood at the front, her hands folded, trying to figure out how to explain this to children who'd already been through so much change. "I have something important to tell you all," she began. "And I want you to hear it from me, at a school on a ranch outside of town. There are children there who don't have any way to get an education, and I've decided to teach them." The silence that followed was worse than any outcry could have been. Clara saw shock, betrayal, confusion, and hurt flash across her students' faces. Then Jenny Martinez raised her hand, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "Is it because of us?" she asked in a small voice. "Did we do something wrong?" "No." Clara crossed the room quickly, kneeling beside Jenny's desk. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. None of you did. You've been wonderful students, and teaching you has been one of the greatest joys of my life. This decision has nothing to do with you and everything to do with me choosing where I can help the most children." "But we need you," Tommy Parker protested. His older brother John nodded emphatically beside him. "Mrs. Patterson's nice and all, but she's not you. She doesn't make learning fun like you do." "Mrs. Patterson is an excellent teacher," Clara said firmly, glancing at the woman in question who looked touched despite herself. "And she'll take wonderful care of you. But more than that, you're all strong, intelligent students who are going to keep learning and growing no matter who's standing at the front of this classroom. I've taught you how to think, how to question, how to find answers. Those skills don't disappear just because I'm not here." "Will we ever see you again?" This from Sarah Mitchell, one of Clara's best readers, her voice wobbling. "Of course you will. I'm not leaving Silver Creek entirely. I'll still be in town sometimes for supplies and meetings, and—" Clara made a decision in that moment, one she hoped wouldn't come back to haunt her. "And if your parents say it's all right, maybe sometimes you could visit the ranch school. We could have combined lessons, sharing between two schools. Wouldn't that be exciting?" She saw interest spark in several faces, though the sadness didn't entirely fade. Michael O'Brien, a quiet boy who'd struggled with reading until Clara had found the right approach for him, raised his hand tentatively. "The kids at the ranch school," he said carefully. "Are they like us?" Clara understood what he was really asking. Were they worth losing their beloved teacher for? Were they deserving of the sacrifice Silver Creek's children were being asked to make? "They're exactly like you," Clara said firmly. "They're smart and curious and full of potential. They have dreams and questions and the same right to an education that every child has. The only difference is that they live too far from town to attend this school, so they've been going without any formal education at all. Some of them are 14 years old and can barely read. Can you imagine if you'd never learned to read? If nobody had ever taught you?" She saw comprehension dawn on several faces, saw empathy replace some of the hurt. These were good children, Clara reminded herself. They'd understand, given time. "I know this is hard," she continued, standing and addressing the whole class again. "Change is always hard, especially when you don't get to choose it. But I need you all to understand something important. Just because I'm not standing in this classroom every day doesn't mean I've stopped caring about you. You'll always be my students, my first students, and I'll always be proud of how hard you've worked and how much you've learned. That doesn't change." "When do you leave?" Jenny asked, still tearful, but calmer now. "Today is my last day," Clara admitted. "I know that's sudden, but Mrs. Patterson has been doing a wonderful job leading your lessons this week, and she'll continue to do so. And I've written letters to all of your parents explaining everything so they can answer any questions you have at home." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of tears, hugs, and bittersweet goodbyes. Clara helped Mrs. Patterson organize the next week's lessons, packed her few personal items from the desk, and tried not to cry as student after student came to say goodbye. By the time the lunch bell rang, she was emotionally exhausted and her box of belongings felt impossibly heavy. Mrs. Patterson followed her outside as the children scattered to eat their lunches. "That was well done," she said quietly. "I know it couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," Clara admitted. "Mrs. Patterson, I hope you know this isn't a reflection on you or the school board or it. I know." Mrs. Patterson surprised her with a small smile. "Miss Whitmore, I'll be honest with you. When I first heard you were leaving to teach at Wade Hollister's ranch, I thought you'd lost your mind. I thought you were making decisions out of heartbreak and poor judgment." She paused. "But watching you with those children just now, hearing you explain your reasons, I think I understand. You're not running away. You're running towards something. There's a difference." "That's what Wade said," Clara murmured. "Well, he's not wrong." Mrs. Patterson glanced back at the schoolhouse where childish laughter drifted through the windows. "These children will miss you terribly, but those ranch children need you more, and you're brave enough to recognize that. I respect it, even if I don't entirely approve of the circumstances." "Thank you," Clara said, meaning it. "That means more than you know." She spent the afternoon delivering her letters to parents throughout town, enduring a variety of reactions ranging from understanding to outrage. Mrs. Mitchell clutched her letter and sniffed about young women making impulsive decisions. Mr. O'Brien shook Clara's hand and told her he understood completely that his own sister had taught in a mining camp school and done wonderful work. The Martinezes invited her in for coffee and spent an hour asking thoughtful questions about the ranch school before giving her their blessing. By the time Clara returned to Mrs. Henderson's that evening, she was exhausted and emotionally wrung out. She'd faced her students, their parents, members of the school board, and what felt like half the town, and she'd survived. She'd stated her choice again and again without apology, and slowly, gradually, some people had begun to understand. Not everyone, of course. She'd seen Thomas Whitfield on the street with his new fiancée, a pretty blonde girl named Catherine who looked at Clara with a mixture of pity and curiosity. Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable, but he'd nodded curtly and hurried past without speaking. Clara had felt a pang, not of longing, but of recognition. That could have been her future, walking on Thomas's arm, molding herself to fit his mother's expectations, slowly suffocating under the weight of respectability. Instead, she was choosing uncertainty and possibility and children who needed her. It felt terrifyingly right. Wade arrived at Mrs. Henderson's promptly at 6 o'clock for dinner, dressed in what was clearly his best suit, dark and well-tailored, though it looked like it hadn't been worn in years. His hair was neatly combed, his boots polished, and he carried a bouquet of wildflowers that made Clara's heart do something complicated in her chest. "For you," he said, offering them with an endearing awkwardness. "And for Mrs. Henderson, to thank her for allowing me to join you for dinner." Mrs. Henderson accepted the flowers with a delighted smile. "Mr. Hollister, how thoughtful. Please, come in. Dinner will be ready shortly." The boarding house dining room was set for 6. Clara, Wade, Mrs. Henderson, and 3 other residents. A widow named Mrs. Chen, a traveling salesman called Mr. Briggs, and a young woman named Alice who worked at the milliner's shop. All 3 stared at Wade with undisguised curiosity as he took his seat beside Clara. Mrs. Henderson had prepared a feast: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh vegetables, and apple pie for dessert. As they ate, Wade answered questions about his ranch with practiced ease, describing the cattle operation, the families who worked there, and the new schoolhouse. He was charming without being false, honest without being self-deprecating, and Clara watched him win over her fellow residents with a skill that suggested he'd done this before, made people see past his reputation to the man beneath. "So the children will have access to the same curriculum as town students?" Mrs. Chen asked, her interest genuine. "Better, hopefully," Wade said. "Miss Whitmore will have complete autonomy over lesson planning and teaching methods. No school board to second-guess her decisions, no parents demanding she teach only certain topics, Just good education tailored to each child's needs. That sounds quite progressive, Mr. Briggs observed. Most ranch schools I've heard of are barely more than reading and arithmetic. Most ranch schools don't have Clara Whitmore teaching them, Wade said, and the pride in his voice made Clara's cheeks warm. After dinner, Wade and Clara took coffee on Mrs. Henderson's front porch, the September evening cool enough to warrant shawls but still pleasant. They sat in the porch swing, not quite touching, but close enough that Clara was hyper-aware of his presence beside her. "How did it go today?" Wade asked quietly. "With the students and parents?" "Better than I feared, worse than I hoped," Clara admitted. "The children were heartbroken, several parents were angry, and the whole town is gossiping about my questionable judgment. But I survived. I stated my case, stood my ground, and didn't apologize for my choices." "I'm proud of you," Wade said simply. Clara glanced at him, at this man who'd disrupted her entire life in the space of a single morning and somehow made it better. "Wade, can I ask you something? And will you give me an honest answer?" "Always." "Why me?" Clara set down her coffee cup, turning to face him more fully. "You said you'd been watching me for 2 years. You clearly had this school planned for months. Why wait until the morning I was leaving to approach me? Why not ask me weeks ago, before everything with Thomas, when I was still settled and stable?" Wade was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "Honestly, because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid you'd say no because of my reputation. Afraid you'd think I had ulterior motives. Afraid that approaching you while you were still engaged to Thomas would seem inappropriate or threatening." He met her eyes. "Clara, I'm not exactly known as a respectable member of society. I'm the mysterious stranger with the questionable past who keeps to himself on his ranch. I didn't think you'd take me seriously if I just walked up and offered you a job teaching children you'd never met. And you thought I'd take you more seriously if you stopped me from boarding a train? I thought you'd be desperate enough to listen," Wade admitted. "And I was right. If I'd approached you a month ago when your life was stable and your future was planned, you would have politely declined, and that would have been the end of it. But catching you at a moment of crisis, when you were already questioning everything, that gave me a chance to show you alternatives you might not have considered otherwise." Clara should have been offended by the manipulation. Instead, she found herself laughing. "That's remarkably calculating." "I prefer to think of it as strategic." Wade's smile was crooked. "But Clara, I need you to know something. Yes, I timed my approach deliberately. Yes, I took advantage of your circumstances. But everything I said on that platform, everything I've told you since, it's all true. I do think you're extraordinary. I do believe those children need you. And I do think you deserve better than what Silver Creek was offering you." "What about what you said at the hotel?" Clara asked softly. "About not being able to bear watching me disappear? About me making everything around me better just by being in it? Was that strategic too?" Wade's expression shifted into something raw and honest. "That was the truest thing I've said in years. Clara, I told you I've been watching you for 2 years. Do you want to know what I've really been watching?" "Tell me." "I've been watching you fight for children nobody else cares about. I've seen you spend your own money on school supplies when the board wouldn't budget for them. I've watched you stay late helping students who struggle, arriving early to prepare lessons that engage rather than just occupy. I've seen you stand up to Harold Patterson and demand better textbooks, seen you organize a library fundraiser that raised more money than anyone thought possible, seen you treat every single child like they matter, like they're worth your time and effort and patience." Wade leaned closer, his voice dropping. "And I've watched you do all of that while barely existing in your own life. Living in a boarding house room, keeping yourself small and quiet, pouring everything into your work because you had nowhere else to put it. It's been like watching someone slowly disappear into their own selflessness." Clara's breath caught. "I didn't realize anyone was paying that much attention." "I was paying attention." Wade reached out carefully and took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "And when I heard Thomas had broken your engagement, my first thought wasn't sympathy. It was rage. Because I knew it would hurt you, would make you question yourself, would probably drive you away from Silver Creek entirely. And the thought of this town losing you, of those children losing you, of the world losing your light because some coward couldn't stand up to his mother. He stopped, jaw tight. I couldn't let it happen. I had to try to stop you, even if it meant looking desperate or inappropriate or completely insane. You did look slightly insane, Clara murmured. Standing on that platform at dawn, all dusty from riding hard, grabbing my hand and telling me not to go. Did it work? You know it did. Wade smiled, but there was something vulnerable in it. Clara, I'm going to be honest with you about something, and it might scare you off, but I think you deserve the truth. When I asked you to teach at the ranch school, when I offered you that position, it wasn't just about the children. It was also about keeping you in my life. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Wade, I know it's too soon. I know you're still healing from Thomas. I know we barely know each other beyond what I've observed from a distance and you've learned in the past day. Wade's hand tightened on hers. But I also know that I haven't felt this way about anyone since Margaret Caldwell destroyed my trust in Boston. And even that doesn't compare to how I feel when I look at you. Like maybe all the loss and pain and rebuilding was leading somewhere. Like maybe I came west not just to escape my past, but to find my future. Clara couldn't breathe. This was too much, too fast, too intense. She should pull her hand away, should establish boundaries, should remind Wade that she was a mess of heartbreak and barely healed wounds with no business considering anything romantic. But his hand was warm in hers, and his eyes were honest, and he'd given her back her courage when she'd been ready to run. He'd offered her not just a job, but a purpose. Not just an alternative, but a calling. He'd seen her when she'd felt invisible, valued her when she'd felt disposable, believed in her when she'd stopped believing in herself. I can't promise you anything, she said finally. Thomas hurt me in ways I'm still processing. My trust is broken. My heart is... She struggled for words. Not ready for this. For you. For whatever this is between us. I know, Wade said quietly. And I'm not asking for promises. I'm just asking for honesty. For the chance to get to know you properly, without secrets or pretense. For permission to care about you while you figure out what you want. That seems like a lot to ask. Probably, Wade smiled slightly. But I'm a patient man, Clara. I waited 2 years to approach you. I can wait as long as you need me to. They sat in silence for a moment, the porch swing creaking gently, the sound of evening crickets filling the air. Clara thought about Thomas, about how he'd courted her with flowers and pretty words and promises of a respectable future, about how he'd made her feel chosen, special, like she was exactly what he wanted, until his mother had disagreed and he'd folded like cheap fabric. Wade wasn't offering her flowers and pretty words. He was offering her truth and patience and a future built on her own terms. He was offering to wait while she healed, to care without demanding, to believe in her even when she couldn't believe in herself. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was nothing like what Clara had thought she wanted, and somehow exactly what she needed. 1 month, she heard herself say. Give me 1 month to get the ranch school established, to figure out my teaching schedule, to prove to myself and everyone else that I made the right choice. 1 month where we're colleagues and friends and nothing more complicated than that. And then she drew in a shaky breath. And then we can talk about this, about us, about whatever might be possible. Wade's smile was like sunrise. 1 month. I can do that. Can you? Clara challenged. Can you really work with me every day, see me with the children, share meals with Maria and the families, and not... She struggled for words. Not push for more. Clara, I've been watching you from a distance for 2 years, wanting to know you, wanting to talk to you, wanting to understand how your mind works. Getting to actually spend time with you, to have real conversations, to watch you teach and see you smile. That's not settling for less. That's everything I've wanted. Wade squeezed her hand gently. I'll take whatever you're willing to give me, for as long as you're willing to give it, and I'll wait for more until you're ready, even if that's never. Just knowing you're in the world, doing work you love, being happy, that's enough. You're very good with words, Clara murmured. Is that a skill you learned in Boston high society? No, it's a skill I'm learning from you. Wade stood, reluctantly releasing her hand. I should go. It's getting late and you've had an exhausting day. But Clara, thank you for staying, for trusting me, for giving those children and yourself a chance at something better. Thank you for stopping me from making a terrible mistake. Best decision I've made in years." Wade tipped his hat to her, that old-fashioned gesture that should have looked silly but instead made her heart flutter. "I'll come by Sunday afternoon to drive you out to the ranch. We should discuss lesson plans, schedules, that sort of thing." "Sunday afternoon," Clara agreed. "And Wade, thank you for dinner, for the flowers, for—" She gestured helplessly at everything. "All of this." "My pleasure," Wade said softly. Then he was gone, disappearing into the September night, leaving Clara alone on the porch with her racing heart and her uncertain future and the first real hope she'd felt in months. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Clara threw herself into establishing the ranch school with the same fierce determination she'd applied to improving Silver Creek's schoolhouse. She developed lesson plans tailored to each child's level, organized the classroom to maximize learning, and spent hours getting to know her students and their families. Manuel, she discovered, had a gift for mathematics that went far beyond basic arithmetic. She ordered advanced textbooks from Denver and watched him devour them with hungry enthusiasm. Sophia became her assistant librarian, helping organize the growing collection of books Wade kept ordering, apparently without any concern for cost, and leading reading groups for the younger children. Thomas, the serious 14-year-old, revealed an aptitude for science and a burning desire to understand how things worked. Clara found herself teaching him basic engineering principles using whatever materials were available on the ranch. Little Maria learned to write her name within the first week and promptly wrote it on everything she could reach until her mother gently redirected that enthusiasm toward a proper journal. The other children, James, Catherine, and the rest, each revealed their own interests and talents as Clara gave them the space and encouragement to explore. Teaching at the ranch was different from teaching in town. The children had chores and responsibilities that sometimes meant late arrivals or early departures. Weather affected attendance. A sudden storm could mean no school for days if the roads became impassable. Resources were limited to what could be ordered from Denver or improvised from ranch materials. But it was also better in ways Clara hadn't anticipated. Without a school board looking over her shoulder, she could experiment with unconventional teaching methods. She took lessons outdoors when the weather permitted, teaching geometry using fence posts and angles, biology through observing ranch animals, history through the stories Maria's grandmother told about settling the territory. She let the children teach each other, pairing stronger students with those who struggled, fostering collaboration instead of competition. And Wade was there, a constant supportive presence. He never interfered with her teaching, but he attended every lesson he could, sitting quietly at the back of the schoolroom with a smile on his face. He helped with school projects, building whatever equipment Clara requested. He invited other ranching families to visit, expanding her potential student base. He made it clear to everyone that the school was Clara's domain and her authority was absolute. He also kept his promise about giving her space. They had friendly conversations about the school, about the children, about ranch business. They shared meals with Maria and the families, discussing everything from literature to politics to the best way to fix a broken wagon wheel. But Wade never pushed for more, never suggested anything beyond friendship and professional collaboration, never made Clara feel pressured or uncomfortable. It should have been a relief. Instead, Clara found herself wishing he would push just a little, because the more time she spent with Wade, the more she saw beneath his careful reserve to the man underneath. Intelligent, compassionate, funny, in an understated way that caught her off guard and made her laugh. She saw how the children adored him, how Maria treated him like a son, how the ranch hands respected him not out of fear but genuine admiration. She also saw the loneliness he tried to hide, the way he sometimes stood at the edge of gatherings rather than fully participating, like he was still an outsider looking in. She noticed how he deflected personal questions, how he changed the subject whenever conversation turned to his past, how he kept himself carefully separate even while being generous and kind. Wade Hollister, Clara realized, was as damaged by his past as she was by hers. The difference was that he'd had more time to build walls around his wounds, to convince himself that isolation was safety and distance was wisdom. The third Saturday of September, Clara woke to find Silver Creek in the grip of autumn's first real cold snap. Frost glittered on the windows, and the sky was heavy with clouds that promised early snow. She dressed warmly and made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Henderson preparing for the town's annual harvest dance that evening. "You're coming, aren't you, dear?" Mrs. Henderson asked, arranging flowers on the sideboard. "Everyone will be there. It would be good for you to be seen, to show the town you're not hiding." Clara had successfully avoided most of Silver Creek's social events since accepting the ranch position. She taught Monday through Thursday at the ranch, staying in the small cabin Wade had outfitted for her on the property, then returned to town for weekends to maintain her room at the boarding house and show the town she wasn't running away entirely. It was an exhausting schedule, but it allowed her to keep one foot in each world while she figured out where she truly belonged. "I don't know," Clara hedged. "Thomas will probably be there with Catherine. The gossip has died down considerably," Mrs. Henderson interrupted. "Clara, you've been keeping yourself separate for 3 weeks now. People are starting to think you're ashamed or afraid. Show them you're neither. Show them that Clara Whitmore can attend a dance and hold her head high, regardless of what anyone thinks." Clara knew the landlady was right. She'd been avoiding social situations not out of shame, but out of exhaustion. It was simply easier not to deal with the stares and whispers. But easier wasn't the same as better. If she was going to truly rebuild her life in Silver Creek, she needed to stop hiding. "All right," she said. "I'll go. But I'm not dancing with anyone." "We'll see about that," Mrs. Henderson said with a knowing smile. The harvest dance was held in the church hall, decorated with autumn leaves and pumpkins, and lit by dozens of candles in mason jars. Clara arrived fashionably late, wearing her best dress, a deep green silk that had been a gift from her mother years ago, with her hair styled softly around her face instead of in its usual severe bun. She'd applied a touch of rouge to her cheeks and lips, and when she caught her reflection in the hall's windows, she barely recognized herself. She looked alive. She looked confident. She looked, Clara realized with some surprise, happy. The dance was already in full swing when she entered, couples whirling across the floor to music provided by a small band from Denver. Clara spotted familiar faces throughout the crowd, parents of her former students, members of the school board, merchants and ranchers and families who'd lived in Silver Creek for generations. And there, near the refreshment table, stood Thomas Whitfield with Catherine on his arm. They were laughing at something someone had said, looking comfortable and content together. Clara waited for the stab of pain, the rush of humiliation, the desperate urge to flee. It didn't come. Instead, she felt nothing but mild curiosity about why she'd ever thought Thomas was what she wanted. He looked exactly the same as he had 3 weeks ago. Handsome in a conventional way, well-dressed, smiling that practiced smile that revealed nothing of substance beneath. Catherine suited him perfectly, Clara thought. They would have a respectable marriage, produce respectable children, and live respectable lives that never challenged anyone or changed anything. It would have been a slow death for Clara's spirit. "Miss Whitmore!" Mrs. Martinez appeared at her elbow, beaming. "How wonderful to see you. Jenny talks about you constantly. She says Mrs. Patterson is perfectly adequate, but she misses your creative lessons. She's been making up stories to share with her younger brother, says you taught her how." Clara smiled, warmth flooding her chest. "Jenny's always had a gift for storytelling. I'm glad she's continuing to practice." Other parents approached with similar messages. Their children missed her, but they were doing well. They'd heard about the ranch school and thought it was wonderful that she was helping those children. They hoped she was happy in her new position. The conversations were cordial, even friendly, without the undercurrent of pity or judgment that had defined her interactions immediately after Thomas's betrayal. They'd moved on. And more importantly, so had she. Clara was accepting a cup of punch from Mr. O'Brien when she felt a shift in the room's energy, a subtle change in the conversations, a turning of heads toward the entrance. She looked up and felt her heart stutter. Wade had arrived. He wore a dark suit that actually fit him properly, his hair combed back, his boots polished to a high shine. But what struck Clara wasn't his appearance, it was the way he carried himself. Wade typically moved through public spaces like he was trying not to be noticed, keeping to the edges, minimizing his presence. Tonight, he walked through the door like he had every right to be there, like he wasn't the mysterious outsider everyone whispered about, but simply another member of the community. His eyes scanned the room until they found Clara. When they did, his entire expression transformed, softened, brightened, warmed in a way that made her breath catch. He started toward her with clear purpose, and Clara became acutely aware that everyone in the room was watching this interaction with rapt attention. "Miss Whitmore," Wade said as he reached her, offering a small bow that was just formal enough to be proper and just intimate enough to suggest familiarity. "You look beautiful." "Mr. Hollister." Clara was proud that her voice remained steady. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I don't typically attend town functions," Wade admitted, but Maria insisted, said it would be good for me to show my face, to remind people that I'm not some hermit on a distant ranch, but a contributing member of the community. She can be very persuasive. "I've noticed." They stood there for a moment, and Clara became aware that Thomas was staring at them from across the room, his expression caught between surprise and something that might have been jealousy. Catherine was whispering something to him urgently, but Thomas seemed frozen, unable to look away from Clara and Wade. Good, Clara thought with a fierce satisfaction she hadn't known she was capable of. Let him see what he gave up. Let him wonder what might have been different if he'd had the courage to stand up for her. The band struck up a new song, a waltz that had couples moving onto the floor. Wade held out his hand to Clara, his expression carefully neutral. "Would you do me the honor of this dance?" he asked formally. Clara hesitated. She'd told Mrs. Henderson she wouldn't dance with anyone. She'd planned to keep to the edges of the room, to observe rather than participate, to remain safely separate from any situation that might fuel gossip. But Wade was standing in front of her with his hand extended, and every eye in the room was watching, and Clara Whitmore was tired of making choices based on what other people thought. She placed her hand in his. "I'd be delighted." Wade led her onto the floor, and the moment his arm came around her waist, Clara felt something click into place. A rightness, a belonging, a sense of homecoming that had nothing to do with geography and everything to do with the man holding her. They moved together easily, naturally, like they'd been dancing together for years instead of seconds. "I thought you were giving me space," Clara murmured as they turned. "I am giving you space." Wade's hand was firm at her waist, proper and respectful, but his eyes held heat. "But Maria pointed out that if I don't occasionally appear in public with you, people will think I'm ashamed to be associated with you. I'm not. I'm proud to know you, Clara, and I wanted to make sure everyone in this room understood that. So this is a strategic appearance." "Everything I do where you're concerned is strategic," Wade smiled slightly. "But that doesn't mean it's insincere. I really do think you look beautiful tonight. And I really have wanted to dance with you since the first time I saw you at one of these events 2 years ago, standing by the wall looking miserable while Thomas Whitfield ignored you to talk cattle prices with his friends." Clara blinked. "That was you? The man who sent me punch through one of the church ladies?" "Guilty. You looked like you needed rescuing, but I didn't think approaching you directly would be appropriate." Wade guided her through a turn. "Thomas was an idiot even before he broke your engagement. He never appreciated what he had." "Maybe I didn't know what I had either," Clara admitted quietly. "I thought I wanted someone respectable, someone approved by society, someone who would give me a stable, conventional life. It wasn't until Thomas proved he couldn't even give me that he'd choose his mother's approval over honoring his commitments, that I realized how hollow those wants were. I didn't want Thomas. I wanted the safety I thought he represented." "And now?" Wade asked softly. "What do you want now?" Clara met his eyes, those dark, serious eyes that had seen her at her worst and somehow found her worthy anyway. "I want to matter. I want to do work that makes a difference. I want to stop living my life according to other people's expectations and start living according to my own values. I want—" She paused, courage failing her for a moment. Then she remembered the girl who'd turned down a train to San Francisco, who'd faced down a school board, who'd chosen the hard path because it was the right one. "I want to figure out what's happening between us without being afraid of it." Wade's grip tightened on her waist, just slightly, just enough. "Your month is up in 1 week." "I know. Will you be ready to talk about this then? About us?" Clara thought about the past 3 weeks, about watching Wade with the children, about long conversations over Maria's dinner table, about the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. She thought about how different he was from Thomas, how different she felt when she was with him, challenged, valued, seen for who she actually was rather than who someone wanted her to be. She thought about all the reasons this was complicated and potentially disastrous. Wade's mysterious past, her wounded heart, the age difference. He had to be at least 10 years older than her 24 years. The gossip that would never entirely fade. The risk of losing not just a romantic relationship, but also the teaching position that had become her calling. Then she thought about standing on that train platform, ticket in hand, ready to throw away everything because she was too afraid to stay and fight. She thought about Wade's hand in hers, his voice saying, "Don't go," with such desperate certainty. She thought about the future she'd have missed if she'd gotten on that train. The children she never would have taught, the work she never would have done, the man she never would have known. "Yes," Clara said firmly. "1 week from now, let's talk about us." Wade's smile started slow and built like sunrise. "Then I have something I need to tell you. Something about my past in Boston that you deserve to know before we have that conversation." Clara's stomach clenched with sudden worry. "Should I be concerned?" "Probably," Wade admitted. "But Clara, I promised you honesty, no secrets, no pretense. So before we talk about any kind of future, you need to know the whole truth about who I was, what happened to me, and why there are still people in Boston who'd be very interested to know where Wade Easton ended up." "Tell me now," Clara said. "Not here." Wade glanced around at the crowded dance floor, the watching eyes, the barely concealed curiosity of the entire town. "This isn't a conversation for public consumption. Tomorrow? Come to the ranch in the morning. I'll tell you everything, show you the documents I've kept, let you decide if knowing my history changes how you feel about me." "It won't," Clara said with certainty. "Don't make promises until you know what you're promising." Wade's expression was serious. "My past is complicated, Clara, dangerous in some ways. The men who framed me in Boston are powerful and vindictive, and if they ever discovered where I am, then we'll deal with it," Clara interrupted. "Together." The waltz ended, and they stood still on the dance floor while around them couples separated and new ones formed. Wade looked at Clara like she was something precious and terrifying all at once. "You're extraordinary," he said quietly. "Has anyone ever told you that?" "You have," Clara replied, "several times." "I'll probably keep saying it. Fair warning." They were drawing attention, still standing close, still holding hands, still gazing at each other with transparent emotion in a room full of gossips. Clara knew she should step back, should thank Wade politely for the dance and move away. She should be careful about appearances, mindful of her reputation. Instead, she squeezed his hand and smiled. "Tomorrow morning, then. Tell me your secrets, Wade Hollister Easton. Let's see if they're as frightening as you think they are." "They are," Wade promised. "But thank you for being willing to listen." Clara barely slept that night. She lay awake in her room at Mrs. Henderson's, staring at the ceiling and replaying Wade's words in her mind. His past was complicated, dangerous. There were powerful men in Boston who'd be very interested to know where he was. What did that mean? What had he been involved in? And why did the thought of his secrets make her nervous but not frightened, curious but not suspicious? She trusted him. That was the startling realization that came to her somewhere around 3 in the morning. Despite knowing him for less than a month, despite his reputation as Silver Creek's mysterious outsider, despite every reasonable voice in her head telling her to be cautious, she trusted Wade Hollister completely. The question was whether that trust was wisdom or foolishness. She rose with the sun, dressed in her practical teaching clothes, and made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Henderson already preparing breakfast. The landlady took one look at Clara's face and poured her an extra strong cup of coffee. "Rough night?" "Complicated thoughts," Clara admitted. "Mrs. Henderson, can I ask you something? What do you think of Wade Hollister?" The landlady paused in her work, considering the question carefully. "I think he's a man with secrets who's trying very hard to build something honest. I think he cares about you more than is probably wise given how recently your heart was broken. And I think—" She set down her spatula and met Clara's eyes directly. "I think he's the kind of man who'd burn down the world for someone he loves, which is either the most romantic or the most dangerous thing imaginable, depending on your perspective." Clara's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. "That's quite an assessment." I've been renting rooms to travelers and newcomers for 20 years, dear. You learn to read people. Mrs. Henderson returned to her cooking. Whatever Mr. Hollister tells you today, whatever secrets he reveals, just remember that actions matter more than history. Judge him on what he's done since arriving in Silver Creek, not what might have happened in Boston or wherever else he came from. That's wise advice. I'm full of wisdom, Mrs. Henderson smiled. Comes with the gray hair and the boarding house. Now eat your breakfast. You'll need your strength for whatever today brings. Clara arrived at the ranch just after 9 o'clock, driving the small buggy she'd purchased with her first month's salary from Wade. A salary that was, as promised, considerably more generous than what Silver Creek had paid her. The morning was crisp and clear, the threatened snow having held off, and the ranch looked peaceful in the autumn sunlight. Wade was waiting on the porch, and the moment Clara saw him, she knew something was different. He wasn't wearing his usual work clothes, but rather the suit from the dance, like he was preparing for something formal and important. His expression was serious, almost grim, and there was tension in his shoulders that she'd never seen before. "Thank you for coming," he said as she climbed down from the buggy. "I know this is your day off, that you should be resting." "I want to be here," Clara interrupted. "Wait, you're making me nervous. Whatever you need to tell me, just tell me. It can't be worse than what I'm imagining." "Don't be so sure," but he managed a small smile. "Come inside. I have documents to show you, things I've kept locked away since arriving in Colorado. Maria's taken the children into town for supplies, so we'll have privacy." They settled in Wade's study, a room Clara had never entered before. It was lined with bookshelves filled with volumes on everything from cattle ranching to classical philosophy, with a large desk positioned beneath a window that looked out over the corrals. Wade went to a locked cabinet, withdrew a metal strongbox, and set it on the desk between them. "Everything I'm about to tell you is true," he said, unlocking the box with a key he wore on a chain around his neck. "I have documentation to prove it, newspaper clippings, legal papers, letters. But Clara, before I show you any of this, I need you to understand something. There are people in Boston, powerful people, who would very much like to know where I am. Not because I'm a criminal, but because I'm a threat to them. Because I know things that could destroy their reputations and possibly send them to prison." "Then why haven't you done it?" Clara asked. "If you have evidence against them, why run instead of fight?" "Because I tried to fight, and I nearly died for it." Wade's voice went flat. 3 years ago, right before I left Boston, someone broke into my home. They claimed it was a robbery, but nothing was taken. Instead, I was beaten badly enough to spend 2 weeks in the hospital. The police called it a random attack. I knew better. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God, Wade." That's when I realized I couldn't win. Not there, not then, not against men with that much power and that little conscience. Wade opened the strongbox and began pulling out documents. So I took what evidence I had, liquidated what assets I could, and I disappeared. Came west, where nobody knew me, where I could start over without looking over my shoulder every day. He spread papers across the desk, newspaper clippings with headlines screaming about the Easton Company scandal, legal documents covered in dense text, letters written in cramped handwriting. Clara leaned forward, scanning the materials, trying to make sense of the story they told. "My father was Jonathan Easton," Wade said, pointing to an obituary dated 4 years prior. "He built the Easton Shipping Company from nothing, spent 40 years making it one of the most successful import-export businesses on the East Coast. When he died, I inherited everything: the company, the warehouses, the ships, the accounts. I was 22 years old and completely unprepared." "That's not your fault," Clara said. "Nobody's prepared to lose their father at 22. "Maybe not. But I should have been smarter, should have questioned more, investigated more, paid attention to things that didn't add up." Wade pulled out a ledger, its pages filled with columns of numbers. "For the first 6 months, I just tried to keep things running. Signed papers my father's business partners put in front of me, approved shipments, paid bills. I trusted the men my father had trusted, assumed they were as honest as he'd been. But they weren't. Well, they were embezzling systematically, had been for years. Skimming from accounts, overcharging clients, and pocketing the difference, using our ships to smuggle goods and avoid customs taxes. They'd been stealing from my father and hiding it well enough that he never caught on. But when I inherited, they saw an opportunity, a grieving, inexperienced kid who'd sign anything they put in front of him. They got greedy. Wade pulled out another document, this one showing bank transactions that even Clara could see didn't add up. I finally noticed discrepancies about 8 months after my father died. Money that should have been in certain accounts wasn't there. Shipments that our manifest showed as delivered, but clients claimed they never received. I started investigating quietly, hiring auditors, tracking transactions, and what I found... He stopped, jaw tight. My father's partners had stolen nearly $500,000 over the previous 5 years. They'd used our company for smuggling operations that involved everyone from dock workers to customs officials to politicians. It was massive, systematic, and completely illegal. Clara's head spun. $500,000 was an incomprehensible sum. What did you do? I confronted them. Stupidest thing I've ever done. Wade's laugh was bitter. I gathered my evidence, called a meeting with all 3 partners, Richard Blackwood, Samuel Crane, and James Hartford, and I told them I knew what they'd been doing. I told them I was going to the authorities, that I was going to make this right, that they needed to resign immediately or face criminal charges. And they said no. They laughed at me. Wade's hands clenched on the desk. They told me I had no idea what I was dealing with, that they had connections I couldn't imagine, judges, police commissioners, newspaper editors, politicians at the state level. They said if I tried to expose them, they'd make sure I was the one who went down for it, that they'd frame me so completely, so convincingly, that nobody would believe my innocence. But surely with evidence can be manufactured, Clara. Witnesses can be bought. And that's exactly what they did. Wade pulled out a newspaper from the pile, its headline reading, Easton Heir Accused of Embezzlement. Within a week of that meeting, the story broke. Anonymous sources claimed I'd been stealing from the company to fund a gambling habit. Forged documents showed transactions in my name. Workers came forward saying I'd pressured them to participate in illegal activities. My own accountant testified that I'd ordered him to hide assets from the auditors. Clara scanned the article, her anger building with every word. They destroyed you. Methodically and efficiently, every day brought new accusations. Every attempt I made to defend myself just made it worse because they controlled the narrative. The newspapers loved it. Rich kid destroys father's legacy through greed and incompetence. It was the perfect scandal. Wade's voice was hollow. My fiancée, Margaret, ended our engagement with a letter. My friends stopped returning my calls. Former business associates crossed the street to avoid me. And through it all, Blackwood and his partners played the role of disappointed advisors trying to save the company from my corruption. What about lawyers, someone to defend you? I hired the best lawyers money could buy. They filed lawsuits, demanded investigations, tried to get my evidence admitted in court. But every judge we went before had connections to either Blackwood or Hartford. Every hearing went against us. My lawyers started receiving threats. Nothing overt, just suggestions that continuing to represent me might be bad for their careers. One by one, they withdrew. Wade pulled out a final document, and Clara recognized it as a hospital admission form. The date was 3 years prior, and the injuries listed made her stomach turn. Fractured ribs, concussion, internal bleeding, multiple contusions. This was the message, Wade said quietly. Stop fighting, or the next time would be worse. So I stopped. I took what money I had left, gathered these documents, and I disappeared. Let everyone believe Wade Easton had fled to avoid prosecution, came to Colorado, dropped the Easton name, and became someone else. Clara stared at the papers spread across the desk, at the evidence of systematic destruction of a young man's life, and felt rage burn hot in her chest. They're still out there, still running the company, still stealing, still destroying lives. Probably. I've tried not to keep track. Wade began gathering the documents, returning them to the strongbox. Clara, I'm telling you all this because I need you to understand what being involved with me might mean. Those men think I'm gone, probably think I'm too broken and frightened to ever resurface. But if they ever found out I'm here, if they ever discovered I still have this evidence, they'd come after you again. They'd come after anyone close to me, Wade corrected grimly. That's why I've kept to myself. Why I've maintained my reputation as the mysterious outsider nobody really knows. It's not because I'm antisocial. It's because the fewer connections I have, the fewer people can be used against me. Clara stood, pacing to the window, trying to process everything she'd learned. Wade's past wasn't just complicated, it was dangerous in ways she hadn't imagined. Men who'd orchestrated that kind of destruction, who'd beaten him badly enough to hospitalize him, who had the power and connections to bend an entire city to their will, those weren't men who'd forgotten about loose ends like Wade Easton. "Why build the school?" she asked finally. "Why create something so visible, so public? Why risk drawing attention to yourself?" "Because I was tired of hiding," Wade said simply. "Because I realized that running from my past meant never having a future. Because those children needed help, and I had the resources to provide it." He paused. "And because I met you, and watching you fight for your students made me remember what it felt like to care about something bigger than survival." Clara turned to face him. "I'm not afraid of your past, Wade." "You should be." "Well, I'm not." Clara crossed back to the desk, placing her hands on top of the closed strongbox. "Those men destroyed your life in Boston. Are you going to let them destroy your life here too? Are you going to keep hiding, keep limiting yourself, keep holding everyone at arm's length because you're afraid of what might happen?" "I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need your protection." Claire's voice rose with frustration. "I need your honesty, which you've given me. I need to know you trust me enough to share the truth, which you do. But Wade, I don't need you to shield me from potential danger by pushing me away before we've even had a chance to see what this could be between us." Wade stood, moving around the desk to stand in front of her. "Clara, you don't understand. These men are ruthless. If they found out about you, about the children, about anyone I care about, then we'll deal with it when and if it happens," Clara interrupted. "But Wade, you can't live your entire life based on worst-case scenarios. You can't refuse to connect with people, refuse to build relationships, refuse to love because you're afraid someone might use it against you someday. That's not living, that's just existing, and you deserve better than that." "I've gotten very good at existing," Wade said, but there was pain in his voice. "I know you have. I was getting very good at it too, living for my work, keeping myself small, avoiding anything that might lead to judgment or rejection. And then you stopped me from getting on that train, and you showed me that there was another option. You taught me to choose courage over comfort." Clara reached up and placed her hand on his cheek, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm. "Now I'm teaching you the same lesson. Choose connection over fear, choose possibility over safety. Choose to build something real instead of just surviving." Wade's hand came up to cover hers, holding it against his face like it was something precious. "What if I fail? What if those men do find me, and everything I've built here gets destroyed?" "Then we'll deal with it together," Clara said firmly. "Wade, I'm not Thomas Whitfield. I'm not going to run the first time things get difficult. I'm not going to choose safety and respectability over standing by someone I—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "Someone you what?" Wade's voice was rough. Clara drew in a shaky breath. "Someone I'm falling in love with." The silence that followed was so complete that Clara could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the wind outside the window, could hear the distant sound of cattle lowing in the corrals. Wade stared at her like she'd just spoken in a foreign language, like he couldn't quite process what she'd said. "You're falling in love with me," he repeated slowly, like he was testing the words. "Apparently I am, which is terrible timing given that my heart was supposedly broken a month ago, and I swore I'd never trust another man. And I promised myself I'd be sensible and careful and protect myself from further hurt." Clara's laugh was shaky. "But it turns out I'm not very good at being sensible where you're concerned. You're stubborn and secretive, and you have a dangerous past and probably a dangerous future, and somehow that doesn't matter because when I'm with you, I feel like myself. The real me, not the version I constructed to please other people. And that's worth risking everything for." Wade's other hand came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "Clara, I can't promise you safety. I can't promise you that my past won't catch up with me someday. I can't even promise you that being with me won't make your life infinitely more complicated than it already is. I know, but I can promise you that I will fight for you with everything I have, that I will stand by you the way you're standing by me, that I will never ever choose safety over you or respectability over honoring my commitments to you." Wade leaned his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her face. And I can promise you that I've been half in love with you since the first time I saw you standing up to Harold Patterson about those textbooks, demanding better for your students even though you knew the school board would fight you on it. You were magnificent, and I thought to myself, there's a woman worth knowing. I've been trying to know you ever since. You stopped me from boarding a train, Clara murmured. I think that counts as knowing me. I stopped you from making a mistake. There's a difference. Wade pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes. Clara, I need to know. Are you sure about this? About me? Because once we cross this line, once I allow myself to really care about you the way I want to, there's no going back. I will love you completely, fiercely, with everything I am. And if you're not ready for that, if there's any part of you that's still healing from Thomas was never capable of loving me the way you're describing, Clara interrupted. He loved the idea of me, the respectable schoolteacher who'd look good on his arm at social functions and run his household efficiently. He didn't love the real me, the woman who fights too hard and cares too much and refuses to accept things as they are when they could be better. You love that woman. You see that woman. And Wade, I've never felt more known, more understood, more valued than I do when I'm with you. Even knowing what you know about my past? Especially knowing what I know about your past, Clara said firmly. You were young and grieving, and you made the best choices you could with the information you had. Those men betrayed your trust and destroyed your life, and instead of letting it make you bitter and cruel, you came west and built something good. You created a home for families who needed work. You built a school for children who had no access to education. You've been quietly helping this community for 3 years without asking for recognition or gratitude. That's who you are, Wade. Not the scandal in Boston, not the victim of corruption. You're the man who sees needs and fills them, who cares about people even when it's safer not to, who stopped me from running away because you believed I was capable of more than my fear told me I was. Wade's expression cracked, and Clara saw raw emotion flood his features. Hope and fear and something that looked like relief. I don't deserve you. Probably not. I don't deserve you either. Clara smiled. But Wade, maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that we've both been through hell, and we came out the other side still capable of caring, still willing to try, still brave enough to risk our hearts one more time. Maybe we deserve each other precisely because we understand what it costs to be vulnerable after you've been destroyed. Wade made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then he was kissing her. Not the gentle, careful kiss Clara might have expected, but something desperate and claiming, like he was trying to convince himself she was real. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and Clara wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring 3 weeks of suppressed longing and 2 years of his watching and her entire stubborn heart into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers again. I love you, he said raggedly. I'm probably supposed to wait longer to say that, supposed to be strategic and careful. But I don't care. I love you, Clara Whitmore. I love your fierce heart and your brilliant mind and your absolute refusal to accept injustice. I love how you fight for children like they're your own, how you make everyone around you want to be better, how you stood on that train platform and chose courage even though you were terrified. I love all of you, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Good, Clara said, her voice shaking with emotion. Because I love you too, and I'm tired of pretending that I don't, that this is just about teaching or professional respect or anything other than the fact that you're the best man I've ever known, and I want to build a life with you. Even with all the complications? Especially with the complications, Clara corrected. Wade, I don't want easy. I tried easy with Thomas, and it nearly destroyed me because it required me to make myself smaller, quieter, less than who I actually am. I want complicated and messy and real. I want someone who challenges me and supports me and sees me completely. I want you. Wade kissed her again, softer this time, sweeter, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When he pulled back, he was smiling, really smiling, not the careful half smile Clara had seen before, but something open and joyful and utterly transforming. We should probably tell people, he said, about us, about what we are to each other. Clara laughed. Wade, after the dance last night, the entire town already knows we're involved. We just confirmed what they've been speculating about for 3 weeks. True, but I want to make it official. I want... Wade paused, then seemed to make a decision. I want to court you properly. Take you to dinners, escort you to town functions, let everyone see that you're mine and I'm yours. No hiding, no pretending, no keeping this private to protect you from gossip. I want the world to know that Clara Whitmore is the most extraordinary woman I've ever met, and I'm the luckiest man alive that she's giving me a chance. That's going to cause significant gossip, Clara warned. Let it. I don't care anymore. Wade's expression was determined. I've spent 3 years hiding, being careful, keeping everyone at a distance. I'm done with that. You taught me to choose courage over comfort, Clara. So I'm choosing. I'm choosing you, publicly and without apology. Clara felt tears prick her eyes again, happy tears this time, tears of relief and joy, and the overwhelming sense of being exactly where she was meant to be. I choose you too, she whispered. Dangerous past, complicated present, uncertain future, all of it. I choose you, Wade. They stood there in the study, wrapped in each other's arms, and Clara marveled at how much her life had changed in 4 short weeks. A month ago, she'd been standing on a train platform ready to run from everything. Now she was standing in the arms of a man who'd chased away her train, given her purpose, and somehow convinced her that she was brave enough to face anything. The sound of a wagon approaching broke through their moment. Wade pulled back reluctantly, glancing out the window. That's Maria returning with the children. They're going to be insufferable when they figure out what's happened between us. They already know, Clara said with certainty. Children always know. True. Wade took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Ready to face them? Once we walk out of this room together, once they see us like this, there's no hiding what we are to each other. I don't want to hide, Clara said firmly. Then she stopped, a thought occurring to her. But Wade, we do need to be somewhat careful. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I'm your employee. People already gossip about impropriety. We should probably establish some boundaries, make sure it's clear that my teaching position is based on merit, not the fact that I'm desperately in love with you. Wade smiled. Clara, you're right. We need to be smart about this. Professional at school, personal at home. Keep the two separate so nobody can claim you earned your position through anything other than being a brilliant teacher. Thank you for understanding. I understand that you've worked too hard building your reputation to let anyone tear it down again, Wade said seriously. We'll navigate this carefully. But Clara, eventually, if things continue between us the way I hope they will, I'd like to marry you, make you my wife, not just my employee. And when that happens, we won't have to worry about propriety anymore because you'll have every right to be involved in every aspect of the ranch, including the school. Clara's heart stuttered. Wade, we just confessed our feelings 10 minutes ago. It's a bit early to be discussing marriage. I know. I'm not proposing, not yet, but I want you to know my intentions. I'm not interested in a casual courtship or a tentative relationship. I'm interested in building a life with you, Clara, forever, if you'll have me. Wade squeezed her hand. But I'll wait as long as you need me to wait. No pressure, no rushing. We'll go at whatever pace makes you comfortable. What if I'm never comfortable? Clara challenged. What if I'm always a little bit terrified of trusting someone that completely again? Then I'll spend every day earning that trust, Wade said simply. However long it takes, Clara. I'm not going anywhere. They walked outside together to find Maria directing the children in unloading supplies from the wagon. The moment little Maria saw Wade and Clara emerge from the house holding hands, she squealed loudly enough to alert the entire property. I knew it! I told you! She bounced up and down excitedly. Sophia, you owe me a penny. I said Mr. Wade and Miss Clara were in love. Sophia rolled her eyes but smiled. You say everyone's in love, Maria, even the chickens. The chickens are married, little Maria insisted. That's different, but I was right about Mr. Wade and Miss Clara, and you all said I was making things up. Manuel grinned at them. Does this mean Miss Clara will live here all the time now, not just during the week? That's not really your business, young man, Maria Torres said firmly, but she was smiling too. Though I am glad to see you two finally figured out what everyone else already knew, you've been dancing around each other for weeks. Wade laughed. Were we that obvious? Painfully, Thomas the teenager said with the absolute certainty of youth. Sir, you looked at her like she hung the moon, and Miss Clara blushed every time you entered a room. It was very obvious. Clara felt her cheeks heat, again, apparently, and Wade squeezed her hand in silent support. Well, since everyone apparently already knew, I suppose there's no point in being coy about it. Yes, Miss Clara and I have developed feelings for each other. Yes, we're courting. And no, it will not affect her teaching or her treatment of any of you. School remains school, separate from whatever is happening in our personal lives. Understood? Six heads nodded solemnly, though the children's excitement was barely contained. Can we tell people? Sophia asked. Can we tell the other families? You can tell whoever you like, Clara said, though I suspect the news will spread through the territory without any help from you all. These things usually do. The children erupted into chatter, already planning how they'd share this development with friends and family. Maria herded them toward the barn to finish unloading while casting knowing glances over her shoulder at Wade and Clara. She's going to be impossible now, Wade observed. She's been trying to convince me to court someone for years. Why haven't you? Clara asked curiously. In 3 years, surely there were women in Silver Creek who would have been interested. Wade shook his head. There were a few who expressed interest, yes, but I couldn't bring myself to pursue anything that felt like settling. I'd already had one engagement destroyed by circumstances beyond my control. I wasn't interested in building another relationship on anything less than complete honesty and absolute certainty. He pulled Clara closer. And then you showed up, stubborn, brilliant, fighting for children like a warrior, and suddenly settling wasn't an option anymore. It was you or nobody. That's a lot of pressure. Can you handle it? Clara thought about everything she'd survived in the past month. The broken engagement, the gossip, the near escape to San Francisco, the difficult choice to stay and fight. She thought about the children she was teaching, the life she was building, the courage she'd found when Wade had taken her hand and said, "Don't go." "Yes," she said firmly. "I can handle it. And Wade, it's you or nobody for me, too." They spent the rest of the day at the ranch, falling into an easy domesticity that felt both new and comfortable. Clara helped Maria prepare lunch while the children peppered Wade with questions about courting customs. After lunch, Clara taught an impromptu lesson about compound interest that had Manuel's eyes lighting up with understanding. Wade sat in the back of the classroom as he always did, but now his presence felt different, not just supportive but intimate, like they were building something together rather than just occupying the same space. Late in the afternoon, as Clara was preparing to return to town, Wade caught her hand and pulled her aside. "There's one more thing I need to tell you. About my past." Clara's stomach clenched. "More secrets?" "Not secrets exactly, just consequences." Wade led her away from the house, down toward the creek where they'd talked that first day. "The men who framed me in Boston, Blackwood, Crane, and Hartford, they're not going to stop being corrupt just because I disappeared. They're going to keep stealing, keep destroying, keep hurting people. And Clara, I have evidence that could stop them. Documents, testimony, proof of their crimes. But using that evidence means exposing myself, revealing where I am, potentially putting everyone here at risk." "You're thinking about going back," Clara said slowly. "Going back to Boston and fighting them." "I'm thinking about whether I have a moral obligation to try," Wade corrected. "For 3 years, I've told myself that surviving was enough, that rebuilding my life was enough. But is it? If I have the power to stop them from hurting others, don't I have a responsibility to use it?" Clara stared out at the creek, thinking about Wade's question. She thought about the children in her classroom, about the families who depended on the ranch for their livelihoods, about the life Wade had built here. She thought about what it would mean if he went back to Boston, the danger, the uncertainty, the very real possibility that he might not survive a second confrontation with men who'd already tried to destroy him once. But she also thought about justice, about responsibility, about the cost of letting evil go unchallenged because confronting it was too dangerous or too difficult. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "Wade, I can't tell you what to do. This is your choice, your past, your fight. But I can tell you this. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. If you choose to stay here and build your life without looking back, I'll stand by that choice. And if you choose to go back and fight those men, to use your evidence to seek justice, I'll stand by that choice too. Even if it puts you at risk? We're all at risk every day, Clara pointed out. I could have stayed in that safe, respectable life Thomas was offering me, and I'd still be at risk of losing myself, of wasting my potential, of dying slowly from suffocation in a life that didn't fit. At least this risk means something. At least it's for justice rather than just comfort. Wade pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. How did I get so lucky to find you? You stopped a train, Clara reminded him, her voice muffled against his shirt. Pretty dramatic gesture. I was bound to be impressed. I'd do it again, Wade said seriously. Every day for the rest of my life, I'd stop that train, Clara. I'd chase you down and convince you to stay, because a world without you in it is immeasurably worse than one where you're here, challenging me and loving me and making everything brighter just by existing. Clara pulled back to look up at him. You don't have to decide about Boston today. Think about it, weigh your options, consider what's at stake. Whatever you decide, we'll face it together. That's what love means, isn't it? Facing the hard things together instead of alone. I suppose it is, Wade agreed. He kissed her forehead gently. You should head back to town. It'll be dark soon, and I don't want you navigating those roads after sunset. Will I see you this week? Try to stop me, Wade said with a smile. I'll come to town Thursday evening for dinner if Mrs. Henderson will have me. And Clara? Thank you. For listening, for understanding, for not running when you learned about my past. It means more than I can say. I told you I wouldn't run, Clara reminded him. I meant it. She drove back to Silver Creek as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and purple. The road was familiar now, well traveled over the past 3 weeks, and Clara let her mind wander as the buggy rolled along. She thought about Wade's past, about the choice facing him, about the future they were building together despite all the complications and uncertainties. Most of all, she thought about how different her life looked now compared to a month ago. She'd gone from planning her escape to planning her future, from running from pain to running toward purpose, from broken and ashamed to loved and valued and known. And it had all started with 2 words spoken on a train platform. Don't go. The news of Wade and Clara's courtship spread through Silver Creek and the surrounding ranches like wildfire, exactly as they had expected. By Monday morning, when Clara returned to the ranch to resume teaching, she found several of the neighboring families had stopped by with congratulations and thinly veiled curiosity. Mrs. Torres from the adjacent property brought fresh-baked bread and spent 20 minutes asking pointed questions about wedding plans. Mr. Chen, who ran cattle on the eastern boundary, shook Wade's hand with approval and told Clara she'd chosen well. Even the supply wagon driver from town made a comment about finally seeing some happiness on the Hollister ranch. Clara handled it all with as much grace as she could muster, deflecting questions about timelines and future plans while maintaining her professional demeanor with the children. The students, for their part, seemed thrilled by the development but respected the boundaries she'd established. School remained school, with Clara as their teacher first and Wade's sweetheart second. It was Wednesday afternoon during a geography lesson about the eastern seaboard when everything changed. Clara was pointing out Boston on the map, explaining its importance as a shipping port, when she noticed Wade standing in the doorway of the schoolhouse. That wasn't unusual. He often stopped by to observe lessons, but his expression stopped her mid-sentence. He looked stricken, pale beneath his tan, holding a telegram in his hand like it might bite him. Children, Clara said, keeping her voice steady despite the sudden hammering of her heart, please work on the reading assignment on page 43. I need to speak with Mr. Hollister for a moment. She met Wade outside, closing the schoolhouse door behind her. What's wrong? Wade handed her the telegram without speaking. Clara's hand shook slightly as she unfolded it, reading the brief message typed in impersonal capital letters. Wade Easton. Stop, your location, known, stop. Blackwood, arriving. Denver next week. Stop, suggests meeting to discuss mutual interests, stop. Advise, caution, stop. Henry Walsh. Who's Henry Walsh? Clara asked, her mouth dry. One of the lawyers who represented me in Boston. The only one who didn't abandon me when things got bad. Wade's voice was hollow. He's been keeping tabs on Blackwood and the others, sending me occasional updates to a post office box in Denver. I check it every few months. This was waiting when I went for supplies yesterday. Clara read the telegram again, her mind racing. Blackwood's coming here. How did he find you? I don't know. I've been so careful, using cash transactions, keeping the ranch under the Hollister name only, staying out of any official records. Wade ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. But someone must have recognized me, or made the connection somehow. Maybe someone from Boston traveling through. Maybe a clerk who processes too many documents. It doesn't matter how. What matters is that he knows, and he's coming. What does he want? The telegram says to discuss mutual interests, but that's code. Wade's jaw tightened. He wants my evidence, the documents I have proving his corruption. He wants them destroyed. And he wants my silence guaranteed. Permanently. Clara's blood ran cold. Wade, you can't meet with him. If he was willing to have you beaten in Boston, what makes you think he won't try something worse here? I know, but if I don't meet with him, he'll come looking for me anyway. At least if I agree to a meeting, I can control the circumstances, choose the location, prepare. Wade looked at her, and Clara saw fear warring with determination in his eyes. Clara, I need to send you away. You and the children and all the families on the ranch. I need to get everyone to safety before Blackwood arrives. Absolutely not, Clara said firmly. Wade, we're not abandoning you to face this alone. This isn't your fight. The hell it isn't. Clara's voice rose, and she forced herself to lower it, aware of the children inside who might overhear. You told me just days ago that if you decided to fight, I'd stand by that choice. Well, someone made the choice for you. Blackwood's coming whether you want him to or not. So the question isn't whether I'm staying. I am. The question is how we handle this together. Wade stared at her, something like awe crossing his face. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, Clara corrected, but I'm also furious. This man destroyed your life once, drove you from your home, stole your future, and now he thinks he can just show up here and intimidate you into silence. I don't think so. We're smarter than that, and we have something he doesn't. What's that? Home field advantage, Clara said. This is your territory, Wade. You know these people, these places. You have allies here. The families who work for you, the ranchers who respect you, even some people in town who've come to see past your reputation. Blackwood's coming into unfamiliar territory, probably alone or with limited support. That gives us options. Wade pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly it almost hurt. I don't deserve you. We've established that, Clara murmured against his chest. Now stop being noble and start being strategic. What do we need to do? They spent the rest of the afternoon planning. Wade sent telegrams to Henry Walsh requesting more information about Blackwood's travel plans and any known associates who might be accompanying him. He met with his ranch hands, explaining the situation in broad terms and asking for their help in maintaining security. He rode into Silver Creek to speak with the sheriff, a pragmatic man named Bill Morrison, who'd always treated Wade fairly despite the town's general suspicion. Clara, meanwhile, continued teaching as normally as possible, not wanting to alarm the children. But after school, she gathered Maria Torres and the other mothers who lived on the ranch, explaining that there might be some visitors coming who weren't entirely friendly, and that everyone should be cautious about strangers asking questions. Is this about Boston? Maria asked shrewdly. About those men who hurt Mr. Wade before? Clara shouldn't have been surprised that Maria knew. The woman ran the ranch household and probably knew more about Wade's business than anyone except Wade himself. Yes, Clara admitted. One of them is coming to Colorado, supposedly to talk. We don't know exactly what he wants, but we're being careful. Good. Maria's expression hardened. Mr. Wade gave my family a chance when nobody else would. My husband was blacklisted from other ranches because of a dispute with a foreman who lied about him. We had nowhere to go. 3 children to feed, winter coming. Mr. Wade hired him anyway, said he cared more about a man's work than his reputation. We won't forget that. If these Boston men come here looking to hurt him, they'll find we're not easy targets. Similar conversations happened throughout the ranch community. The families who'd found homes and livelihoods here were fiercely loyal to Wade, and they made it clear they'd stand with him against any threat. By the time evening fell, the ranch felt less like a vulnerable target and more like a fortress preparing for siege. Thursday evening, Wade came to Mrs. Henderson's for dinner, as promised, though the mood was considerably more tense than their previous shared meals. Over coffee on the porch afterward, he showed Clara the response from Henry Walsh. Blackwood's traveling with his son, Jonathan, and a hired investigator named Pierce, Wade summarized. They're staying at the Grand Hotel in Denver and plan to send word about a meeting location once they've assessed the situation. Henry says to be extremely careful. Pierce has a reputation for violence, and Jonathan Blackwood is apparently just as ruthless as his father. When do they arrive in Denver? They're already there. The telegram was sent 2 days ago. Wade's hands tightened on his coffee cup. They could send word any day now. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself. Then we need to be ready. Wade, I think you should agree to meet with them, but on your terms. Not in Denver, where they have the advantage, and not on the ranch where the families could be at risk. Somewhere public, somewhere in Silver Creek, where there are witnesses and the sheriff can maintain order. They won't agree to that. Then they don't really want to talk, do they? They want to intimidate and threaten you in private. Clara set down her own cup, leaning forward intently. But if Blackwood really believes he can buy your silence or convince you to hand over your evidence, he'll have to agree to a public meeting. Otherwise, his trip west was a waste of time and money. Wade considered this, his expression thoughtful. The Grand Hotel dining room. Public, witnesses, the sheriff's office right across the street. If Blackwood wants to meet, that's where it happens. And we make sure you're not alone, Claire added. I'll be there, obviously. But also Henry Walsh, if he can travel from Denver, the sheriff, maybe some of the ranch hands positioned nearby. Not threatening, just present. A reminder that you're not the isolated, friendless target you were in Boston. Clara, if anything happens, if they try something, then we'll deal with it, Clara interrupted firmly. Wade, I'm not naive.